Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
It's that time of year. Once again, the eyes of the world turn to the world center of racing. But before the iRacing Daytona 24, before the Rolex 24, it's time for the Roar Before. 3 classes, just over 2 hours of racing, and what's bound to be an exciting start to the iRacing special events. Hi folks, Arjuna Kenki Party alongside of Paul Smith once again, and excited to kick off what is bound to be an electric year of iRacing competition. Paul, we're always in for a treat when we come to Daytona, and with the 3 classes we've got on offer, I think we're going to be in for a really fun start to what is a cracking slate of special events.
My goodness, I remember years ago when you basically had a month or so between special events. Look at that calendar that we've got coming up for you this year. Absolutely tremendous. Brilliant events, all of them, and a couple of new events as well thrown in there for good measure. But the Raw, it always gets the year going, doesn't it, Arjun? It's certainly a fantastic event.
I've enjoyed the reincarnation that we've had over the Roar in the last handful of years. Excited about some of the additions like Paul mentioned. In January, we've got Dale Jr.'s charity event to add to the slate. And yeah, it's not really a chance for many of our drivers to breathe when you look at some of these months. 3 events quite consistently, and plenty of 24-hour events to look forward to. Next weekend, Paul, is the iRacing Daytona 24. We'll have more than 10,000 drivers attempt what is one of the most fun events of the year. How much are you looking forward to that? Of course, this is the preview, but that's the big show.
Yeah, and the iRacing Daytona 24, it is always an exciting event. It's always one that gives us some drama, some controversy, shall we say, as well. But certainly, those drivers, it's that first 24-hour event. It's a lot of darkness as well under the floodlights here at Daytona International Speedway. And it gives those drivers that first feel, that first big event to get involved in. But this, the Roar Before, 2.4 hours, it's a different challenge out there in some different machinery as well.
Leads us quite nicely into that event format. 144 minutes, and qualifying has just gotten underway. 8 minutes, drivers get the track to themselves, and 2 laps with which to set their fastest time. Now, dynamic weather was something that we were wondering how that was going to play out. Does seem as though on the forecast, not expecting any rain, but we'll keep you apprised as to how that plays on forward. Drive-through limit, something I'm going to be keeping my eye on, Paul, because 20 incidents may sound like a lot, but with track limits through the Le Mans chicane and through some of the other places as well, I think we'll see some drivers potentially fall afoul of that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I was spotting last night for a couple of drivers in one of the races at 10 p.m. GMT, and certainly it was an interesting event. We did get rain in that one, we're not expecting it here, but there was quite a few drive-through penalties that happened in that race, so yeah, keep an eye on that one.
And as we've got 3 classes, let's take a look at what cars are going to be on offer. Plenty of these cars have been around on the platform for a while. They've been joined by the relatively new BMW M4 Evo GT4, but you can see plenty of BOP additions to talk about, with the exception of in the Spec LMP3 class, where that Ligier sits untouched. Quite interesting, Paul, to see how it all plays out, but Daytona's got lots of straights, and so power reductions tend to be quite important.
They certainly do, and you'll see the Mercedes and McLaren dominate the GT4 field here today in that one. The TCRs are a bit more spread amongst the different cars, although quite frankly why they've all got a 1% power reduction I don't know, but there you go. That's I'm not the one in charge of the balance of performance, am I? But that Honda getting that 1% fuel capacity, it does help manage how long that car goes in compared to the other 3.
Mentioned that qualifying is underway. First times are beginning to trickle their way on in, and already half the session is officially in the books. There you can see the provisional pole sitter as of a moment ago. Ivan Machado Perez has just been displaced at the very top by Daniel Harris in the LMP3s, but we've got, remember, 3 classes. Quite interesting how the splits have worked out, Paul, because we've got about 20 apiece of the P3s and the GT4s, and only 12 of the touring cars. Going to make traffic quite interesting.
It certainly is, and the first time that the TCRs get caught up in traffic, they're still going to be in a relatively big pack. They're really good at slipstreaming those cars, so the first time through can be a little bit sketchy for them, for the prototypes especially working their way through. The second time through the TCRs, well, that's generally when you get the TCRs mixing with the GT4s as well, so that's when it gets really fraught out there.
Can see a handful of the touring cars out there. Both Gar Valero, Miguel Freitas failing to set qualifying times their first time by, so there's now full pressure on them for lap number 2. Just a reminder, no rain in the forecast as it stands right now. There's a 1% chance of rain in about 3 hours time in sim, but 1% might as well be nothing. We're seeing the second of the time start to fly in for the LMP3, so I've already seen Brandon Rosberg, Ivan Perez, and a handful of others. Perez has gone to provisional pole, but here comes Pascal Stix in the core sim racing car, dipping below the yellow line on his way towards the start-finish beam.
I mean, I think we all know what my thoughts are on track limits around here. It's pertinent, but, well, I mean, if iRacing allow it and you don't get a 1x for that, then all's fair in love and iRacing.
Paul Smith will get his opinion on track limits plenty through the course of the broadcast. Seems as though Austin Young, the Geodesic Racing number 49, is going to put it on pole in the LMP3s. Let's see what's going to happen then in the GT4s, where McLarens, Mercedes, Porsches, we've got a decent mix of a couple of different manufacturers. Alberto Senau dips below the yellow line as well on his way to finishing the qualifying session in the Rincon Racing 12. He does not improve his lap time. We'll see if anyone else is going to find some time. Sven Haase has also not been able to improve. Paul, seems as though lap 1 in the GT4 is plenty fast.
Yeah, certainly was. Jamie Christensen coming across the line to set his lap time, not improving on his best there. But the GT4s, I want to mention this, what a stacked field it is out here, and Yuri Kastor is another of those drivers. So many big names in that GT4 field. I think that's going to be one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of looking up and down through the field right now and wondering who exactly would you count. It's good to see. Paul, you remarked on this. Jamie Fluke, not often we see him in the world of iRacing nowadays, but he's made his way back into the field. He's flying his way through the Le Mans chicane, flicks it left, then back over to the right. I think that's just within track limits as well. We'll see how quick it is as he pirouettes back onto NASCAR. The banking turns 3 and 4.
And you think as well, Apex Racing Team, the partnership that they've had with Mercedes these last couple of years now, that they've got some success out of that, haven't they? So interested to see what Jamie can do here in this event as he heads to the timing line. Again, taking the favoured shortest route to the line. Does improve his time by just under a tenth of a second, but only moving him up to 13th.
And I did notice we missed the car crossing the line, but his teammate Gaio Valero, who failed to set the lap time first time around, grabs pole in touring cars. So Senau in GT4s, Young in the LMP3, and then in the touring cars, it's Gaio Valero. 3 different teams at the front, but stacked fields, as Paul mentioned. We're in for a treat, that is for sure. That fog's not going to put a damper on the mood, that's for sure. And these drivers get ready for the first of our iRacing special events of the year. The Roar Before. We line up at the World Center of Racing. Let's take a look at how they'll stack themselves up for the roughly 86 laps in the LMP3 field, and it's the Stetson-wearing Austin Young that punches his way to the front of a HydroRace geodesic inside on the run down to turn number 1. He'll have Ivan Perez to his outside, but Daniel Harris, Brandon Roseborough, his teammates will line up inside behind the pole sitter. Francis McGinn, Daniel Lomba have some work to do to avoid being boxed out. 1, 2, 3, the goal for the black and gold. 7th goes the way of Jan Sentkowski in the Team Hoisingveld entry. Timo Milikangas for the WSR Esports butt kicker team is alongside. Fernando Busquets, Obsidian Racing, and then Alex Ardoin, the top 10, with just over half a second splitting these LMP3s. Remember, stripped of their downforce as well to go as fast in a straight line as possible. Pascal Stix, Felipe Barreto, 11th and 12th positions, with 13th going the way of Dario Frattini. Theodor Jensen will be alongside on row 7 with Benjamin Kuda, Damien Vrie on row 8. Niels Koch and Nick Thiessen, 17th and 18th positions. Just 2 more cars on the board with times. Kevin Dauguet and Enrico Trenti. Byron Pierce lines up at the very back of the 21-car LMP3 field. GT4s, lots of McLarens. Alberto Senau, over a tenth of a second quicker than Alexander Peregrina. Row 2 is going to see Sven Haase, Cody Deeth alongside, and a pair of Mercedes. Before you get to the first of the Porsches, Corin Tengunez in the ever-popular Team 75 Bernard by SimRC livery. Aaron Lopez will be alongside. I think that's Aaron Vasquez's second account. With 7th in the GT4s, going the way of Damon Woods. Jack Sedgwick hoping to cook something up alongside. Olivier Piatek, Florian Bodin, 9th and 10th, with John Badefer and JB Christensen lining up behind them. 13th, hopefully not unlucky for Jamie Fluke, with Ian Chenguven alongside there. DJ Alessandrini, Kevin Des Noyers, Dylan Burst, Claudio Mack through the top 18, with still more names and still plenty of strong names. Theodore Bergeson, Timo Hayden, Eureka Kastorp, Lucas Telman, Chris Beats, and then Vladislav Shopov, 24 GT4s, and then Patrick Kingston, Christian Steenberg, and Pablo Castro, Team PGZ, hoping to stalk their way from the very back. And finally, over to the touring cars, where we do have plenty of choices, but on the front row, it's the Audi for Gaio Valero, the Honda for Konstantin Stolzenberg, and only 18 thousandths between the two of them. Carlos Mosca, Matthias Pentler, Eric Goldner, Shizlar Nagy, and then just a couple of more cars in this touring cars. Augustin Fernandez, Gonzalo Fabi, Miguel Freitas, Norbert Leitner, Eric New, and then Logan McKenzie. Running up and down through the starting grid. Paul, quick thoughts from you. Pace cars off and away, we're ready to go.
This should be an absolute thrill ride. Sit back, enjoy this one. Green flag in the air, we're underway.
It's another year of iRacing special events off the banking into turn number 1. Don't forget, all 3 of our classes racing at the very same time. It's not going to be 1, 2, 3 quite for the black and gold, but it is going to be a nice start for HydroRace Geodesic Racing. They lead in towards the International Horseshoe for the first time of asking. It's going to be single file up front for them inside of the LMP3s. GT4s off the banking through turn number 1, and there's some drama as you'd expect.
Oh yeah, drama at the back, and Pablo Castro I think caught up in some of that. Kevin Denoyes as well involved in all of that. There's big drama. There's a car sat in the middle of the road with the TCRs. Thankfully, they take the turn.
Well, we expect chaos when there's 60 cars in the grid. Don't necessarily know how many got tangled up and are now claimed as a victim. I do see a 8-car breakaway at the front of the GT4 pack. I think that's probably what triggered some of that TCR chaos. As these drivers get ready to work back onto the banking, Paul, the LMP3's into the bus stop for the first time of asking.
Yeah, the Le Mans chicane, of course, renamed in partnership with the venue out in France. Through the chicane, and fortunately these drivers only got a bit of mist in the air to worry about. Last night in the races that I was looking at, there was rain. Fortunately, we're staying dry.
I see one driver who had a bit of an issue out through the chicane, but outside of that, I think the LMP3's through safely. Take a look at the GT4s flying through that chicane as well. Single file, what you would hope to see at this point. A little bit of a swap between 3rd and 4th and 5th positions as they cross the line to end lap number 1. But I see already 60 started, 4 in pit lane as a result of lap 1 shenanigans.
There's 4 drivers there, as you mentioned, with the mechanical meatball warning flag, so the black and orange flag. And yeah, it's mainly in your GT4s and one of our prototypes as well. So Ayhancan Guven, one of those drivers in GT4 who got caught up in all the drama right at the start of the race. Oh, that must smart, must that, for Ayhancan.
It's not the best feeling, but he's probably aware of what racing's like. The driver that's of course competed in plenty of real-world racing in GT4 cars specifically as well. Swap around at the front of the touring car field at the end of their opening lap. It is Konstantin Stolzenberg that leads, but as Paul will attest to in a couple of moments' time when we talk about strategy, not always the worst thing in the world to sit behind when it comes to those touring cars. Draft a big part of the equation and how you deal with the slipstream and navigate your way through the strategy. You can see the fog in the air. I'm not necessarily sure the drivers can blame that for all the chaos that we saw at the start of the race. But Paul, let's start to take a look and pick our way through some of the replays from the start.
Yeah, so back to race start we go then, and it was trying to go 2-3 wide through the S's just on the exit of turn 1. Cars getting spun around into the runoff area. So you see Guven off to the right-hand side of screen there, but it all started in turn 1. There's the McLaren spun around in the middle there, and then they're going 3 into 1. Just does not go. The car in the middle, Guven with nowhere to go. Big contact with the McLaren and with the Mercedes. As into the international horseshoe, Daniel Harris trying to fight it out here with Ivan Perez.
And this is where the teamwork plays its part. Bit of draft being fed between Austin Young and Daniel Harris, and so in through the kink it's Hydrace Geodesic back to 1 and 2 in the black and gold. You can see that they are struggling a little bit sometimes to run the same line. That's what I was mentioning on the grid. These LMP3 cars, Paul, they strip out as much of the downforce as they can, all in the effort to try and go as fast in a straight line when they get back over to here. The banking, and now working through effectively all 2.5 miles that the stock cars run for the Daytona 500.
Yeah, the downforce on these cars will be as very little as they possibly can get away with, and then take a click more off just to be sure of that top speed. But you do need to have that grip and that stability through here, especially into the Le Mans chicane, through turn 1. Breaking through into turn 1 is one of the trickiest points around this track here, especially in these prototypes with such low downforce settings. So you will see drivers losing it into that braking zone just because you are turning and braking and across the bumps at the same time.
Now, this is not necessarily something I would recommend, but it does seem as though some bump drafting in the LMP3 cars between the teammates. Even with that, Perez closes up. Top 3 are breaking away, though. The gap at the front now, almost 1 full second back to Francis McGinn. Meanwhile, GT4's bottom of your screen. Paul, the conga line, as mentioned, 8 cars strong. The breakaway is built up.
It certainly has, and that instant lap 1 did have a big effect on it. The touring cars, by the way, they're just going through NASCAR's turns 1 and 2. The leaders are going through the infield, so in the next lap or 2, we're going to be seeing the LMPs, the prototype leaders, coming through the touring cars. And the thing is, pretty much all but one of the touring cars are all together there in one shot.
They won't be for much longer, though. I get that sneaking suspicion. And Paul, let's talk about the strategy. Let's talk about fuel, because as I mentioned, these cars, you can do a decent amount of fuel saving if you sit behind like our Pole Sitter Gal Valero is doing right now.
Yeah, you can bump draft as well, just to help push the car in front along if you feel that you can maybe work together and break away. It's a long race, especially these TCRs at top speed. Bump drafting will help you. You've got to work together until that last portion of the race where you're then at each other's throats. But right now is the wrong time to be defending like your life depends on it. You want to be working together if you're in a queue like this to try and break away a gap at the front.
And so, 11 cars remaining in the touring cars. Logan and McKinsey, unfortunately, tangled up as one of those victims at the start. Joins Ian Chenguven, Byron Pierce, Olivia Piatek, and Theodore Bergerson as being unfortunately done for the day. You can see in the bottom corner, Daniel Harris is on board, sitting in second as they unload off the banking with just under 10 minutes of this race complete and getting ready for the first cycle of traffic. The touring cars working through the western horseshoe right now, getting ready to cycle back onto the banking. But as Paul called out, it's going to be this lap coming out of the Le Mans chicane back towards the line where that traffic starts to play its part. And we're going to get to a point in this race, Paul, especially with 60 cars starting this race as compared to the 50 that have started in previous years, where traffic's going to be an ever constant and ever fun threat for these teams and drivers to think about.
Oh, it certainly is. And traffic management is a huge part of any multi-class race, and if you've got that experience, if you are able to work your way through, not only work your way through, but work your way through safely, then that is going to be key to you getting a very good result out of it. Now, the worst place to catch these touring cars is through that bus stop chicane for these prototypes, because these prototypes carry so much speed through the Le Mans chicane compared to those touring cars. Those touring cars want to understeer all the way through there. In the infield, it's a little bit narrower, but you can work your way through. You cut back on the inside of the touring cars on corner exit. The worst thing that you can do if you're in a prototype or in GT4 is try and overtake a touring car on the outside of a corner on corner exit, because these cars, they just want to push wide and you'll end up with no space.
Well, here we go back towards turn one. You can see the touring car still in their line. GT4's behind them, exiting back onto the banking as well. But here we go. It's going to be on the run up towards that second of the chicanes, where the leading trio of prototypes will end up catching the traffic for the very first time. And the advantage here of being the leader is typically the drivers will see you coming and give you a little bit more room, but the disadvantage of being behind is sometimes you then have to try and thread the needle with a gap that's always closing. 1, 2, 3 will try and now work their way around the outside as they get out through turn number 6. Perez keeps as close to the back of Daniel Harris as he can, just trying to maintain that pressure. And now they'll try and duck back down low the touring cars, the shortest distance around the track. And so the leaders will be able to slide their way through before the Le Mans chicane, exactly what they were hoping for.
Yeah, but it's those that are further back in that prototype class that are going to be feeling it hard as they get stuck behind these TCRs. Look at them coming into the Le Mans chicane. The front three, they're fine, they're through. The rest are all having to get on the anchors, slot in somehow in between the traffic. And when you're in that prototype, it's very easy to get impatient and to try and just force your way through into a gap that's just not there. But fortunately, I say fortunately, there's one car that's just had issues out there. Alex Ardoyan has had issues out there. But fortunately, pretty much everybody has got through.
You say issues, I say a car on the flatbed back to pit lane and now joined by the 22, the BS Plus competition entry of Niels Cox. So that's 2 getting tangled up, and we didn't get some great angles of the start incidents. Let's see if we can get some better replay angles of what's happened here as we pick back up with the GT4s. Still Alberto Senau that leads in that Rincon Racing McLaren, but behind him sits Sven Haase, and plenty of people know just how quick Sven can be. And let's see how he's plotting and just waiting potentially to pounce at the end of this race. The fog's going to make it interesting with some of our camera angles, I think, over the course of the day. That's the BS Plus car.
Oh!
Wow!
And that's all because the other car, the 60 of Alex Ardouin, has had the issue coming out of the bus stop chicane, the Le Mans chicane. Here we go, here's what's happened. So through the right, he's then going to hit that, yeah, gets a wiggle on, bang, and no matter how much you hold the brakes, you're just a passenger at that point.
Wow, there were some other cars that came flying through that were very, very close to being tangled up in that one, but fortunately just the two involved. I just saw my timing screen. Another driver is being taken back to pit lane on the flatbed. This one is Yuri Kastorp. So the incidents continue to accumulate. Now what's happened here, Mao's esports driver into the chicane. He's got some pressure behind from Impulse Racing. He veers off to the right, pulls aside. I'm suspecting there's some sort of failure there.
He's got damage to the front already. You can see that on the car. And then it's just listening in.
Hits
the
the wall.
Touches the wall. And is that then the steering broken?
Wow.
Well, it seemed pretty straight though when he pulled it to a stop. So I don't know.
It's an uncharacteristic mistake at this level, but it just shows the margin with which you run. You're trying to always open up the corner as much as possible. Not open up it that much maybe, as that's Vladislav Shopov that's off the road in the Impulse Racing car. And now drops down the field as a result of that. I did mention though, 8-car breakaway in the GT4. Paul, this is the second group of cars as they sit right now being led around by Dylan Burse. Includes Jamie Fluke, Jamie Christensen as well. But these drivers are by no means out of it this early in the race.
No, but they'll be looking ahead and thinking, how are we going to work this one to close up that gap again? But we've seen that lap traffic, it can have a huge effect on people's races here. And so you've got to be careful as we look on board with Jamie Christensen. Good to see Dylan in this race. Always liked watching him race. And Jamie Fluke right behind him, giving him the old shove, the old bump draft down the straight. People might be watching this who maybe new to iRacing or anything like that and thinking, why on earth would you want to be pushing the car in front along? Surely you want to go past. No, you've got to work together. You have to work together and try and push forward to that next group, because if you start fighting with each other, you just slow each other down and that makes things worse.
And you got a great view of the inside of the front end of a Mercedes AMG. That's the extent to which Jamie Fluke is content to just sit behind and push for the time being. It's a 3.5 second difference now between third and fourth in this prototype field, and we jump back on board with Ivan Machado Perez as into the GT4 traffic the leaders work. This is where it gets tricky as well. Austin Young's locked up. Leader goes wide. Teammate, what's Daniel Harris going to do? That's the advantage of having a friend behind. Lifts off the throttle, slots back into line. It stays as they are as they continue to work through the traffic. But the first sign of a mistake from our pole sitter.
It's so easily done as well, as they actually passed their GT4 teammate to the leaders in prototype. Yeah, it's so easily done with this, Ligia, and you can just lock up that inside wheel, and no matter how hard you try to unlock that wheel, it just stays locked up and you end up running wide. And look at this, worst part to catch up to GT4 traffic right through the Le Mans chicane. But it's all about that exit, and, well, can the driver of Perez in third place get a good run?
I think ultimately there, a bit of desperation from Ivan Machado Perez to not lose some ground, but it's all just going to stay as they are. Remember that as much as I was talking about the GT4 second pack not being far behind, same can be said in this LMP3 pack. Remember think about what might happen if these drivers had to lift into the chicane. They're running very wide through turn one, and Machado Perez is going to be invited now to hold that line around the outside. It's a bold pass, and Daniel Harris going to take it 3 wide potentially with traffic. A little bit more contact between the two of them as they slide past Jack Sedgwick, who's been separated out from the front 7 of the GT4 pack. And now Machado Perez gets the move done up the inside through the kink.
That was nice. I've done a little bit of a hip check as well, just to say, hey, this is my space here. But look at this now, right in the middle of the leading GT4s, working their way through. And this is just fantastic demonstration. Contact between the two leaders. Oh, and it's around.
And well, Machado Perez kind of instigates his own demise. Daniel Harris gets tangled up. And what do they say? Watch the rejoin. And we'll take plenty of looks at that rejoin on the replay machine, that is for sure. It's now 5.2 seconds. Francis McGinn has been passed. Timo Milikanga second. Brandon Roseborough third. Somehow there's still two Hydra Race geodesic racing cars on the podium, but one's completely new.
Well, just from the live pictures, I mean, I'll cast judgment on the replay properly, but that looks an appalling rejoin just from the live pictures. But here, well, huge drama at the front of Prototype, and that does affect your GT4s as well. Dylan Burse has got a mechanical meatball warning flag. He's back to pit lane in GT4, so they've got caught up in all of that shenanigans.
And the leaders, I think, got tangled up as well. So Aaron Lopez, who's now giving a shot to the back of Alberto Senau, sits in second as there goes Milikangas in the WSR entry up the inside. This race has never had its lack of drama, that's for sure. I just think back to, unfortunately, what was it, 2023, when poor Pablo got disqualified for being shoved wide at the on the run up to the International Horseshoe. Let's go back in time, Paul. Let's try and pick apart what happens here. But I think I said it. Not Alberto Senau, excuse me. Ivan Machado Perez, the instigator of his own demise.
And then tries to rejoin, and that is appalling. Hold your brakes when you've got cars all coming around you. I know it's heat of the moment stuff and all that. There's contact, there's more contact, around he goes. You've got to hold your brakes here. They've got cars coming around and just absolutely poleaxes Dylan Birch out the way.
That is, one of the more egregious rejoins that you'll see at this level, maybe, but you can understand maybe to some degree the frustration seeping in. I mean, Daniel Harris doesn't do a great job either there, and he gets tagged and actually shoved around as well, but wow. Big drama, all with one incident. I said it, Machado Perez doesn't hit Austin Young once, hits him twice at least.
Yeah, and unfortunately, innocent bystanders and all that get caught up in it. So, that was... I won't say what I actually feel, but that was poor. That was really poor. But let's look at the positives here, though. Corentin Guinness, there's been a bit of a split in that GT4 field, and that's allowed the front three to just really break away now.
Can tell you Daniel Harris meatball flag, meaning that iRacing has seen enough damage that they're going to require him to pit and fix it up. He's just pulled down to pit lane, and I think you can understand that Cody Deeth slides past Corentin Guinness, though. The Porsche almost looked like it was standing still off the banking, such was the advantage the Mercedes had, but I'm wondering if that was also just partly draft affected rather than anything else. Still seeing the LMP3 cars continuing to work their way on through. I just saw a comment in the RaceBot TV chat, by the way, that I think quite eloquently sums things up as we watch some of the other LMP battles. Jansen Tukowski behind now, Theodore Jensen. But Paul, amazing, it can happen in any split, was the comment.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it last night when I was spotting for a couple of drivers. So yeah, well, I say spotting. I was acting as weatherman for that one last night, and yeah, some of the people. It's very easy to see the red mist, have that descend, and just stick on the loud pedal and try and get yourself turned around again. But you've just overtaken and lapped those cars, so you know how many cars are coming. Just patience. You've got to have some patience there.
Patience and racing drivers, two things that not often go together. Brandon Roseborough gets past Milikangas. It's once again Hydra Race Geodesic 1 and 2. The black and gold sits on top as they cross the line. End of 12 racing laps. 4 in contention, though, for the second and third steps on the podium. Dario Frattini in 6th position, not too far away as well. going back to the incident with Machado Perez, I'll just re-emphasize, Milkanga's going to potentially be passed by Francis McGinn as well. That's a dive up the inside, but doesn't quite get it stopped in time. On the power off the corner, Timu Milkanga's just about holding on, although Francis McGinn's going to just continue to be there. A little frustrating little mosquito almost holding that line. Not going to let necessarily your leader of the pack, Brandon Roseborough, break away, but definitely a threat. When you have no downforce on the car, Paul, what it does mean is that you lock the brakes a lot more easy, but the other thing is you just are less effective in the braking zone because you have less downforce as well.
Oh yeah, you have that less performance there, and of course with these prototypes, as you're scrubbing that speed off, you're also reducing what little downforce you're producing off of the car, so you're then relying more on the mechanical grip out there. So as you go into, say, the International Horseshoe or the Western Horseshoe or even Turn 1, very easy to be starting locking a brake and you end up running wide and giving other people opportunities out there. So you've got to know how this car works with a heavy fuel load as well. Quite a lot of drivers may not have done a full stint practice with a heavy fuel load, and they come diving into Turn 1 later in the stint with worn tyres, and they just start running wide because they're going too deep.
And well, definitely not saying I've done that before, but the pit lane entry is often different on old tyres as the Audi bobbles over the curb there as they pass the touring car traffic once more. Yeah, pit entry is sometimes different on worn tyres as opposed to fresh tyres, so you can't just practice pit entry by yoinking out a whole bunch of fuel. So GT4 is going to have a little bit of breathing room from the touring car and LMP traffic for just a little bit, but touring car conga line still 11 cars strong as the second cycle of traffic passes its way on through. But it is Gaio Valero that leads with about 24 minutes complete, Paul. So quite interesting to see the pole sitter retaking the point of the field as the traffic sweeps their way back around.
I think right now TCR is in a very good place in terms of the balance of performance of the different cars, and especially with the changes that iRacing made to the tyres on this car a couple of seasons ago, really has helped bring this car back to life and get people who had maybe stepped away from the cars to come back into this class of car. You get some tremendous racing in TCR. Now, I would say that because I'm biased, because it's the car that I'm semi-competitive in. So, but it is a different style of driving as well, and you will see some names that can go really well in a touring car, but maybe not have that same speed in a prototype or a GT3 car, for example. But yeah, these TCRs, they put on a great show, and you look at how close this front pack is, even after the leaders have come through twice now on the TCRs, they're still there together.
Absolutely, and I think it's when we get to the first cycle of pit stop, then we will start to fear that they'll break up. That's typically what a pit stop window will do. 9.2 seconds, the margin at the front of the LMP3 field. Austin Young waltzing away with the lead right now, but never say never. He cannot afford to breathe and slip up in a moment through traffic, so he's going to definitely be kept on his toes with now less than 2 hours remaining in the first iRacing special event of the year, the Roar, presented by SimMotion. Glad you joined us here on the iRacing Esports Network. We check back in with the GT4 leaders, where at 1.8 car deep was the train. It is threatening to build up into a 9-car train as it sits right now, and Jamie Fluke, who started back in 13th position, he's gained 4 spots to work his way up through the field, but by no means is he the biggest mover in the class. Left-hand side of the screen, check out the GT4s as they sit right now. 11, 12 positions gained. Patrick Hingston has been the biggest mover so far.
Yeah, some big places being gained out there in the early going. Would have been helped a little bit by that first lap issue as well, so definitely a bit of assistance through all of that. But yeah, you look at how the from 6th place down, it's all pretty much there or thereabouts, all within slipstream of each other. It's the front 5 that have got that little gaggle at the front there. So we're not going to see this one pan out until, say, towards the end of this race.
And it's what makes the strategy battle so interesting. I've always thought they throw their chips out at the start, but you only see really how they play out by the time you get to the very end of the race. There's Patrick Hingston, by the way, in the number 13. Might be up 13 positions sooner rather than later, although DJ Alessandrini is directly behind him and putting the pressure on. And see the bump draft in effect there from Aaron Lopez Vasquez as he once again shoves Alberto Senau into the corner. And that is now 14 laps complete for the GT4s. Another comment in the RaceBot TV YouTube chat from Andrew Langham. Please stop. He's referring to me talking about the lead that Austin Young has, teammate at Geodesic Racing. Feeling a bit superstitious right now, Paul.
Well, I mean, if we stopped talking about drivers out there, we'd be out of a job, wouldn't we? So, look, Lewis McGlade doesn't believe in the curse of the commentator.
He's very
much. Yeah, he is very wrong. I'm very much in the camp of the curse of the commentator does exist, but we do have to talk about them. And what a job that is happening out there for your leaders right now. Well, saying that, Pascal Stix has been slowly catching up, hasn't he, on Dario Frattini?
Yeah, you
and,
know,
and the rest at the front.
Lap time wise, these drivers in second, they're having a pretty fun fight, I think, between the 4 of them. It's not necessarily translating into lap time, at least just yet, so that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Are they being a bit more aggressive with each other and putting more mental pressure? That's something that necessarily don't always think about at this level, but even just showing yourself in the mirror can slightly upset some of these drivers and cost them a 10th here and there. Did see, by the way, there's another front-wheel drive apologist, Paul, that's just jumped into iRacing Esports Network Twitch chat. As the news broke yesterday that Suelia Almeida, who has won plenty of championships in the world of sim racing, last year competed in the Radical US Cup, won the championship there as well. He's going to be racing for Brian Herder Autosport in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge, of course, rolling out to Daytona slightly in just a few days' time. He's jumped into the Twitch chat to say hi. Really exciting to see another sim racer take more steps in the world of real motorsport.
And it's always great to see, be able to watch that racing and hear well, it'll be Radio Show Limited who'll be working on those gigs. Hearing them talking about them and go, oh please, I've been commentating them for 5-6 years. I know all about them. It's great to see, and it's good to see that people are realising that sim racing is a way of finding some talent out there. I mean, Red Bull Racing put out a series of videos with Sebastian Job, giving him an opportunity to get behind the wheel of some very special machinery, and what a performance he put on as well. Okay, that was testing, it's different to being a race, but to see what he was able to achieve with, let's face it, relatively little seat time in those cars, it shows that there is transferable skills between the two, the sim world and the real world.
Oh, 100%. And obviously, you know, I've got to give a bit of a shout out as that's Francis McGinn out wide. That's what I was talking about with some of the little mistakes in this little grouping, maybe costing them some time here and there. I've got to give a bit of a shout out. I was just at Sebring this past week with Racing Prodigy, where, you know, there's 24 sim racers that are getting a shot in real race cars. And, you know, I'll talk to a Max Pappas, who's raced Formula One, NASCAR, Daytona 24, you name it, he's raced it, he's coached it as well. I'll talk to a Kent Stacy, who, that's a name not many people will know, but he's an engineer that's, again, worked across of everything, was part of the Mercedes GT3 program and developing all of that. But they're all so impressed by sim racers and the skill set that they can bring over to the real world. Another name just to throw out there is Tom Drewer at Radical USA. someone that, you know, I've been talking to at some of these Racing Prodigy events about Suelio and the skill set that he was able to bring even to Abu Dhabi, where Suelio competed in the Radical World Finals, where they get drivers who compete in the Radical all around the world to come and, you know, have effectively a showcase of the best. So yeah, I think we're getting to that point where there's more opportunities hopefully as well, and so definitely keep an eye on that. Racing Prodigy have a BMW M2 championship just kicking off if you're thinking about how you can get into a real race car and the pathways that sim racing can provide. 30 minutes though complete, Paul, an hour and 52 minutes left to go. We are starting to get closer and closer to the pit stop window, and this is a race where some of the classes, they are very much thinking about how the strategy is going to fare itself out.
And to be honest, I think the draft is going to play a huge part on this as well, because if you're the one who pits first and then you end up in just some clean air, you're going to be out of that draft and you're going to be losing that little bit of performance here. So you've got to think big picture. But if you're confident that you are quicker and significantly quicker than the car in front, but you're just not able to quite make that move and make it stick, ooh, I thought there was going to be a rear ending there, as one of the Impulse Mercedes just in amongst the LMPs. But yeah, if you're able to be confident in your ability to jump somebody in the pit, strategy can have a big play. For me, personally, I think you're just going to see people go long in this race, go as far as they can. Last night, we had the mix of rain in there that we're not going to have here today. Weather forecast still no rain at all, for these drivers to mix things up strategy-wise. But last night, there was some wild strategies, and I'll hold my hand up and say I got the strategy call wrong last night.
Paul.
And yeah, where we took wets at the first stop. We should have waited till the second stop. But hey, you live and learn. We still pushed P2 and P3, so that was the main thing. So yeah, so it shows strategy plays such a big part of this, and with this just being a solo event, you've not got to worry about driver time as well. It's just these drivers who are going to be taking part.
It's a good point. This is not an optional solo race like we had some special events at the end of last year. You have to do this race 2 hours, 24 minutes entirely by yourself, and so it's not a long race by any any stretch of the imagination. It is just something that you keep in mind. That fog, by the way, definitely something that's keeping it interesting for us with these TV cameras, but don't worry, behind the wheel it's not going to be much of an impact for these drivers. This is the second effectively big train of GT4 cars. Timo Hayden leading the battle pack in 10th position, but there's plenty of chopping and changing here. And speaking of, look at this, Konstantin Stolzenberg, a couple of car lengths at the line. Guy Valero's dropped to third. TCR touring cars, a little bit of change up front.
Yeah, so is this now where they're starting to see a little bit of movement in those TCRs? I'll tell you right now, from driving the Veloster, it's a short wheelbase car. I personally don't think it's the ideal car around here. I think something like the Honda or the Audi is a really good car around here. Here's a look back then at around the inside, losing the position then to Gonzalo Fabi. But you know, that Audi and that Honda's got a really good chassis underneath it, and it really does well where you need that bit of chassis play. The Veloster, it can be very twitchy on the brakes especially, so that can have a huge effect. I am seeing yellow flags out there on the Western Horseshoe, and that's what.
Yeah, that's Claudio Mack. I'm going to guess just based on the information my timing screen was feeding me. Maybe tangled up with Enrico Trenti, but I saw the same thing that Paul saw. And the replay machine never misses a thing. And wow, through the kink, it's already all gone wrong.
Yeah, we'll wind the tape back a little bit more. Thank you, VT operator. So let's have a look then. This is coming through the kink. Tricky part of the track. Does the GT4 and what? Oh, ooh. I think he got a tag from behind from the butt kicker car, the WSR car.
Yep, and I'm not quite sure who that was. Is that Timo Miller? That was second place, so that's an LMP car that's a lap down, and it's not even the LMP car that makes the contact there.
No, that was the GT4. It was the car on the inside, just moving out a little bit. And that's the problem with that King. You've got to make sure you give each other the space, but those GT4s, they do want to understeer slightly, and through that corner, they've not got the level of downforce that these prototypes have got, and that's what happens. Another
switch, by the way, at the front of the touring car field. Are we playing some games? Konstantin Stolzenberg has dropped back to third, so behind Gaio Valero. We're 3 wide, we've got chaos! Oh, through the horseshoe! There's for a moment, shoving up the inside went Francis McGinn. I think that was Aaron Lopez in contention. No, Jamie Fluke rather in the second of the Apex machines, but they all held on to it, Paul. They're better drivers than I maybe gave them credit for, although, again, maybe a bit risky with still an hour and 47 minutes to go.
It was the 4th place TCR car that was shoved out the way as well, Carlos Mouska as well. So, yeah, getting a bit physical in there, and this is what happens when you get all 3 classes mixing together here. The Paul touring car driver, you want to hold your line, and ideally, if you're the fast car, you want that car in front of you to hold the normal line and hold where they're going. But when you've got 2 different classes both trying to overtake at the same time, it's just to hold the middle and close your eyes.
Oh, and well, close your eyes indeed. Francis McGinn has dropped down to 6th through all of this, and I do get the sneaking suspicion based on everything we've seen so far. That car may A, have damage, B, getting increasingly close to the incident limit, I'm willing to suspect. We're going to see at least one drive-through, if not a couple more. Replay machine, let's pick it back up, and well, 3 wide, they made it work.
After a little bit of physicality on the TCR car, but it was Jamie Fluke who got a little bit physical there. He's a man who knows about touring car racing because I used to race against him. So, yes, he knows what it takes. But you look at this. Oh, no, now that's going to be Pentola, isn't it?
That's Eric Goldner in the touring car, the re-dragon entry that, after all of that, no steering really anyway, and bang into the wall.
Yeah, as soon as you've lost that steering, you pretty much your day's done and all of that. I've noticed that Pentola as well has got a mechanical meatball warning flag in TCR, so big drama for your car number 1 as well.
That's exactly what you were talking about right there. That's the RD Simsport car playing ping pong with Damon Woods. Wow. I guess it rains in terms of incidents. It doesn't tend to come one at a time in this race. We're an hour and 45 minutes left to go. We've got a lead breakaway to the tune of 14 seconds in the LMP3 class. And we haven't really seen too much in terms of GT4 back and forth. Alberto Senna, though, 1.2 seconds clear. Let's give a little bit more love to the GT4s for a little bit of time, Paul, because this is probably the lead battle that's going to be the most intriguing now to the end of the race.
Oh, big slide there for Lopez through the chicane. Does beautifully holds the car, though, and kept the pace up, but that's just going to allow Sven Hasse and also Cody Deef to be able to stay in that slipstream and work forward. And Sven Hasse, I mean, a lot's been said about Sven in the past, but he is a very quick driver, and if he keeps his focus and uses that aggressive streak in a positive way, he is one of the quickest sim racers in the world, in my opinion.
Yes. And the benefit of not having a webcam on Sven is there's no risk of us cutting to it and it being engulfed in clouds of smoke potentially, as well, as we found out in the IMSA Esports Global Championship, which, speaking of, great time to plug that, Paul, tomorrow here live on the iRacing Esports Network, we've got the season finale, the Michelin 240, here from Daytona, 2 hours and 40 minutes of competition, and our champions to be crowned in what is now the 3rd season of IMSA's Esports Championship. Williams Esports are your championship leaders in the GTP class. Team Redline, the championship leaders in the GTD, both with somewhat commanding leads going into the finale. But it's Daytona. Anything can happen.
And you look at the level of competition in that series as well. It has been incredible scenes in that championship. And certainly Daytona will give us some plenty of drama, plenty of excitement, and plenty for you to talk about as well, Arjuna.
Yep, we'll have Peter Mackay, Joey Atterbury joining myself in the broadcast booth for the fourth of the championship rounds. Peter, of course. Last Sunday, I was commentating on the IMSA Esports Global Championship from the real Sebring. Peter Mackay is going to be commentating on it from the real Dubai. So he saw what I did, Paul, and he went, you know what, you've gone to a racetrack. I've got to go to one even further away.
Yeah, he's commentating on the Dubai 24 hours. So yeah, he's pulling double duty, is our Peter, and I'm sure he'll be doing a fantastic job as well, but he might be a bit tired by the end of that broadcast tomorrow.
Yeah, and again, go and watch the start of the, I guess, global motorsports calendar in many ways now. The 24 Hours of Dubai does kind of signal the start of endurance racing starting around the world. Just make sure you watch that and watch us at the same time. Don't go anywhere.
P5 in GT4, Corentin Guinness is, it was Alexander Peregrina who was around the car number 9, and that was from now down to 8th place, so Fluke and Cedric moving up places. And
so at least that Peregrina is going to be able to slot into that group, but it's with traffic, it's on the front of an LMP3 car, and he does hit the wall, but at least minimizes the impact.
It's a glancing blow, isn't it? It's not too bad, is that, in comparison to what it could have been. We'll take another look at this one then. So it's just going through that S's, and it's really tricky. He thinks there's just one car behind him of the prototypes. He's let that one through, and then all of a sudden, oops, there's another car right there behind. Your prototype lead, 15 seconds now that lead has got up to in your prototype lead. Absolutely incredible for Austin Young right now. It's the race for second, third, and the rest of the podium spots has been really intriguing for the prototypes.
Now, Paul, this LMP3 category sometimes gets plenty of slander, libel, whether it's written or spoken, because people say, oh, there's only dentists that drive it, you know, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you do need a platform for people to grow through prototype racing ranks, right? Much like you have in Formula cars. And so it does kind of make sense to me that you have LMP3 as the precursor to an LMP2, which still races in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The LMP2 class is by no means a low level of competition, so you have to have the LMP3, right? Did you realize that, or did you know that they actually at one point were making an LMP4 class as well? Yes, I did. And I mean, it's almost like with open wheelers, isn't it? In Europe, you've got F4 through to F1. That's the sort of natural progression for those categories. And why not have that sort of progression through prototype classes? You have it with GT racing, don't you? You start off with a bog standard sort of tin top club racing, and then you move forward through that field into GT4s and then into GT3s. And that way, why not have that rate of progression through the prototype classes? Because I would say that something like a Radical would be a starting point for somebody in prototype racing. Well, that's the kind of conversation I was having with some people at Sebring, because there was a track day the day that I got there to Sebring, and they had an LMP4 car actually running around, not the Ligier, which was what the one that really got made, the JSP4, but it was called a Nova Prime or something like that, and it was just an interesting conversation because, like you said with the Radical, I was almost arguing that you've got Radical and this similar other cars like that almost serve as the introduction to prototypes, the way they're called sometimes by people is introduction to slicks and wings, which I really love. I love that idea of get used to a new type of racing tire, but also the downforce that you have as well. But yeah, no, I just didn't even realize until I saw that car in the real world that they made an LMP4 class, or were trying to. I'm just very grateful that it didn't really go anywhere. Leader in GT4 at one point was threatening a breakaway, but the work behind, second through fifth, have played nice, and so Alberto Senau is being closed on once again, and we're coming up to just about 50 minutes complete in this race, Paul, so lap by lap inching towards the start of the pit stop window, and Alberto Senau has been up front and not really able to save any fuel. So, going back to your point about wanting to try and run long, he's probably one of those drivers that we're going to be thinking about in the GT4 class, at least, coming in early.
Yeah, and it's that you've got to play the percentages when you're in the lead. Senau has had a little bit of a gap, not the biggest of gaps, but it's been big enough that he's not really providing the slipstream to Aaron Lopez behind. He's very much on the sort of the threshold as Lopez for the slipstream. He is picking up a little bit, but not as much as he would like to. It's that dynamic of how do you work it? Do you just stay up front and try and build a gap at the front but use a little bit more fuel, or do you basically say, right, let's do it like a peloton in cycling, in cycle racing, and keep on switching the lead and each other getting that little bit of draft to save fuel. And of course, with saving fuel, you're going to be saving tyres as well, aren't you? Lifting off early, braking that little bit later, not quite as hard. It's how you weigh up the percentages of what's going to work for you.
You heard a big lift there from Cody Deeth, just emphasizing the extent to which the fuel saving is going on right now. These drivers further back in the line, of course, able to do a little bit more fuel saving. Check back in with our leader for, to be fair, what feels like the first time in about 30-40 minutes. And, well, Paul, track limits, what do we have to say about that one?
I'm sure that in the world of IMSA and of the Rolex 24, you're not allowed that far out at that point.
I regret to inform you, Paul, that they do not police track limits at turn number 1, and it is a free-for-all if they really wanted to.
Anyway, people know my thoughts and feelings about that. Yeah, I've always said that the best drivers are the ones who can be the fastest within the defines of the track limits. And anyone could go fast if you go off the track.
True. Except me.
Well, or me. That's why we're in here and not out there. But it's true. If you don't have the defines of that track, well, you might as well just have a big car park and decide, right, okay, good luck.
Like Paul Ricard. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, there's enough slander being thrown around about specific tracks and whatnot. Yeah, no, I had a chance to talk with Bo Barfield, who runs IMSA Race Control, and as part of the IMSA esports stuff, we did reach out to IMSA to ask them, and they said, yeah, no, it's a free-for-all at turn 1, and so kind of reflects what iRacing have with no off tracks. The only thing that I guess you have to think about in the real world, Paul, iRacing's added the new debris system that's going to add a bit more impact to, going offline and things. By the time you get 23 hours and 50 minutes into the Rolex 24, they're not cleaning marbles off the track. You're not going to want to go half an inch off the racing line unless you absolutely have to.
Oh, no, absolutely. And even in this race, you're going to see that build-up of debris offline, tyre marbles and dirt and gravel picked up, and that actually has got a big effect when it comes to lapping traffic towards the end of the race, especially for those prototypes. We have got a prototype on the pit road, Nick Thiessen, so he's the first one to take a trip down from further down in our prototypes. And if you're further down in the field, why not try something different? Because if you do the same as everybody else, you're going to get the same results, aren't you?
Absolutely. I've always, like you say, be an advocate for trying something different. And again, you've got to try earlier rather than later, because you leave it too late, you leave yourself with little time for the change to really have some sort of an impact. You can't save fuel 3 laps before your stint. You have to start saving before at the end of the day, so little things that all play their part in that strategy equation. Again, we called it out earlier, this is a race that must be done solo. There are no driver changes in this event. Next week, when we get underway for the iRacing Daytona 24, teams will have the ability to use as many as 15 drivers if they want. In the broadcast split, we'll most typically see 3, maybe 4 or 5 drivers taking to the lineup. The amount of practice that these drivers do, they tend to want to maximize the drive time as well. It's 5 at the front for the GT4s. We'll keep an eye on them. We've got a swap around for 3rd in the LMP3 class. Fernando Busquets started down in 9th position, now onto the podium, passing Brandon Roseborough.
Yeah, Roseborough is up a place, by the way, from where he started in this race. But it's getting towards that pit stop time as Roseborough may be thinking just a little tiny bit of lifting coast here. Although they're not that far off of Timu, are they, in 2nd place? Malakangas in 2nd. They've got 19 seconds behind Austin Young. It's Young's to lose. He says, knowing full well about the curse of the commentator.
Where's Andrew Langham into the chat to say, Paul, stop talking, you're not allowed. Yeah, no, I mean, I think what we're seeing is two-pronged, right? A, it's clear Austin Young has got at least relative to the no Daniel Harris, no Ivan Machado Perez still in the field, because those seemingly were the 2 drivers that were going to most push Austin Young, but relative to the other drivers, sorry, I've just seen what Andrew Langham's put in chat, and I'm so distracted. Austin curses himself enough. So Paul, keep talking. If Austin crashes, we'll blame him instead.
Well, no, is it a situation of where the 2 curses then cancel each other out? As in comes Austin Young from the pit into the pits from the race lead.
Well, he's hopefully avoided a pit lane speeding penalty. It can be very easy, again, with the low downforce, the lack of braking performance, the straight line. Here we go with Milikangas. Busquets is seemingly staying out. He's going to go 1 lap longer. Will that be important late in the day? Francis McGinn extends as well. It's a busy time for the rest of the P3s.
Oh, we've got a veritable pit party going on here onto pit road in the P3s. I would imagine you're going to see everyone taking tyres at this pit stop. It's the 2nd stop where you won't be taking those tyres. Although, I did see that core car not go up onto the jacks, so no new tyres there for the Pascal Stakes.
Roseborough seemingly drops relatively quickly. We'll see the race off and away from pit lane. It's going to be close between any of the other drivers. Roseborough and Milikangas are the 2 that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for here. Now, you can do fuel and tires at the same time, I think, in these LMP3 cars, much like with all other IMSA competition. Roseborough has gone for a little bit of a shorter fill than Milikangas, and so Milikangas has been jumped by Theodore Jensen on pit lane. Other thing about Daytona is you got to wait a little bit longer to release yourself off the pit limiter. Wait, off and away they go.
Can I just say that I'm so thankful that they introduced that to iRacing. The amount of times that I hit that pit wall when you used to be straight off the limiter, and yeah, it's a bit embarrassing on cold tyres to hit that pit wall. But yeah, back out underway for them. We had 5 drivers in your P3s not take a pit stop that lap, so we should be seeing them heading onto pit road soon.
You can see left side the pit stop times for those P3s as mentioned, front 4 or so, a little bit shorter in fill time than the rest. It's going to be a little bit lighter of a run then for them. They'll be potentially a bit faster, but they might give up a bit more time in the final sequence of pit stops. Francis McGinn has stayed out there, so I think maybe that explains a little bit of what you saw earlier, Paul. Remember, there was that one moment where he almost got ran over and we got a little bit worried. He's just been saving copious amounts of fuel and 2 laps longer than anyone else except Daniel Lomba that joins him on running on to lap 33.
See, the problem with that is if you're so focused on hitting a fuel number that your pace is actually losing you more time than you're going to gain through that pit strategy. And again, it's that balancing act that you've got to play there. And that's one thing that you've got to be careful with. It's very easy to say, oh, we'll go 2 laps longer. But are you doing that at pace?
Now, there are some drivers that are better at fuel saving than others. I was sometimes good, sometimes not so good, as the saying would go, at fuel saving. Keep an eye on that. These drivers, Timo Miller-Kangas and Dario Frattini, they've been jumped by Fernando Busquets through all of that, who's come out directly behind Brandon Roseborough. So he's third on track, net on pit lane. Just waiting, as mentioned, for Francis McGinn to cycle his way down. Aaron Vasquez has dropped backwards, though, in this queue of GT4s. Has he had a slowdown at the bus stop?
Well, what I can tell you is
Miller-Kangas
has got a black flag.
Oh, I did say we were going to get some drive-through penalties, didn't I?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, now is that a case of, well, it won't be bump drafting because those are 0x incidents, so that won't affect him. But yeah, getting caught up in other people's incidents and things like that soon pick up a black flag there. So yeah, going to have to come down onto the pit road.
He has 3 laps to serve it as well. Probably see him, depending on the traffic he sees in front, decide to strategically use it. I mean, you've got Dario Frattini all over your rear end as well, so you do want to just keep that in mind. Don't want to get wrapped up into a battle of no consequence in effect, remember. Francis McGinn off and away from pit lane, 34.8 seconds, so he goes a little bit short. Miller-Kangas off to the box now, and here goes McGinn, so I think this might actually work out for him track position-wise, Paul. Whereas Fernando Busquets, who's just passed Brandon Roseborough as well down to turn number 1, McGinn's got 3 seconds on them.
It's worked out for him there, and he's come out in front, so yeah, that's giving him a good gap, and the crucial thing is he's come out with a gap which isn't going to give a slipstream to the cars behind. So he's able to now just focus up on himself. What has happened here down at Le Mans chicane for the Apex Racing car? This is through the right-hander, and that is a corner cut right there. That's a slowdown penalty. I
love how Paul didn't even know what was coming on the replay. He just saw the laziness of the car moving out to the left and instantly realized, oh wait, slowdown penalty. Alberto Senau's into pit lane from the front of the GT4 field, though. About an hour in, there's no chance of these drivers cutting out a pit stop, Paul, but your race leader in first.
And taking tyres as well. I think that's going to be the sensible option. I mean, the track temperature is 22 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in freedom. It's going to be what the
don't ask me.
Something like that. You know, you've got to get those tyres up to temperature. So it'll take about a lap and a half before you're really starting to feel the benefit of those new tyres. So if you're pitting first, then you've then got to get that speed up again. By the way, Timo Miller-Kangas has got a mechanical meatball warning flag now.
Yes, I think he had an interesting experience with pit lane. I think it might also have been technically related because can't get you a replay of, unfortunately, what has happened to him. But yes, I think that is potentially day done for Miller-Kangas, who has been sitting on pit lane now for 60-odd seconds and counting. Alberto Senau, 58.1 seconds. Now, this is another thing about the GT4 cycle that we're going to have to keep an eye on, because there are some other teams and drivers that have elected, Paul, to stop for as short as 37 seconds. So Senau's gone for 20 seconds longer. We know no one can cut a pit stop out. We're officially 1 hour complete with the iRacing Roar presented by SimMotion. And the GT4 window, I think, is very much wide open. Senau no longer in the race lead overall. Patrick Hingston jumps in front.
Yeah, but crucially, Senau right there with Hingston. Now, Hingston, 37.8 seconds in the box. So I would imagine that there's no tyres being taken there, or if there has been tyres taken there, it's just one or just a couple maybe. We'll have to wait and see. Senau, I think, has done a full service, given it a polish as well, and is back out there. But because he had that gap there at the front, is able to just come out right there with them. Now, what are the rest going to do? Sven Hasse still going out there, 32 laps for him. Cody Deeth as well, 32 laps. Some of the others, Timo Hayden and also Lucas Salmon, onto pit road right now.
I'm trying to cast my mind back a year, which is difficult, and it's hard for me to cast my mind back 3 weeks sometimes, but I seem to remember, as 3 wide off the corner we go, Alberto Senau's had enough, sitting behind Patrick Hingston and just going to slide his way back in front. I just seem to remember, as there goes Corentin Gunes, followed out by John Badefer, seem to remember that the drivers that filled up in the first stint as much as possible elected not to take tires in the second pit stop cycle. Is that what Alberto Senau was thinking? It worked a treat for Will Chadwick, if memory serves. Senau, though, is not going to be in the race lead as we work off the corner. He will be jumped, but it really works out for him in many ways. I think it's Aaron Vasquez versus Alberto Senau versus Corentin Gunes at the front of the field.
Crucially, Gunes took a full service there, 55.7 seconds in the box for Corentin. So is that going to be the case of, as you point out, that second stop, it's going to be later in the race, not taking tyres. That means that straight out of pit road, you're going to have those warmer tyres, so you're able to push on straight away, but towards the end of the race, not have the same level of grip as, say, some others who take tyres on their second stop. This is where the strategy is now going to be at play. How does this all work out for them? This is fascinating. Don't go anywhere, folks. We've still got an hour and 21, and we don't know who's going to win this one.
We have absolutely no clue. Haven't talked about touring cars for a little bit either. We'll get to them in a few moments' time. Just waiting for Sven Hasse, for Cody Deeth, former teammates at Grid & Go. Cody Deeth now representing Eclipse Sim Sport. They're going to swap around off the pit lane, and Cody Deeth is going to take advantage. That's an important thing for him. What's it going to sequence out, though, to? As now they have that long wait. Paul says he likes it because it's a little bit safer. They added it because Michelin added a RFID tracking system, and they wanted to add that into the IMSA championships as well. They, though, between Cody Deeth and Sven Hasse, 8 seconds or so shorter in the pit lane. And so what do you know, Paul? Lead up front, 8 seconds.
Now, how's this going to pan out? This is great. This is fantastic stuff. And these drivers here, they've got to be careful not to start tripping over each other and slowing each other down. They need to keep pushing on and keep that performance up to be able to try and keep with Deeth and Hasse when it comes to that second pit stop of the race for them. So again, it's back to that strategy that we talked about at the start of the race. Sometimes you've just got to, don't let your ego take charge, work together with the others and push yourselves forward.
Don't let your ego write checks that your car can't cash. That's the line. Anyway, I did see a bit of damage on the side of the number 48 for John Badefer, so he's been through the wars, doesn't seem to be impacting his speed, and does not seem to have taken any optional repairs in his pit stops trip either. You can see the gap that they have back to Alberto Senau, in danger of losing out on draft. The McLaren's got to do some work. The pole sitter, who led for the opening 30-odd laps of this race, now finds himself somewhat on the back foot. Let's go to touring cars once more, though. 3 cars now starting to stretch their legs. Stolzenberg leads. Gonzalo Fabi sits in second. And the pole sitter, Gaio Valero, biding his time in third and maybe content to save some fuel.
Now, don't forget that balance and performance adjustment that we showed on the graphics at the start of the broadcast. That Honda has got a 1% less sized fuel tank compared to the Audi and the Hyundais out there. So those Hondas trying to mitigate their frugalness, shall we say, in the engine, especially when the Type R engine starts really kicking in. But yeah, those Hondas, I like the Hondas because they've got a really good chassis underneath them. The Audi, it's a different car. It's got a DSG gearbox. The gearing's different on that car. It's a bit more of a tank, is that car as well, is the Audi. The Hyundais, though, they're the cars I've always driven here in the TCRs, and the Elantras, well, they've just dropped off a little bit, haven't they, those Hyundais, by about 5 seconds or so. It
does seem as though we're seeing that little stretch. It's not necessarily a comment on the BOP, but there was a great story about last year's IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge race at Daytona, which is a 4-hour race to start the season off, and a car, they had an issue with it, and then they needed to find a replacement ECU, and as some people will know, Audi somewhat pulled back some of their racing programs, and so they weren't able to get an ECU at Daytona. So what did they do? They had to look around, and they found a wrecked race car in Mexico which they could pull the ECU from. So they did that. They got someone on a plane, flew him to Orlando. Now, for those of you that know the geography around Daytona, it's still about a 2-hour drive from Orlando. So as we see a swap for the lead, Konstantin Stolzenberg goes high, Gonzalo Fabi and Gaio Valero slip up the inside. Once again, a slightly coordinated switch, if we're being honest. Maybe a slowdown to serve there as well. So they got someone on a plane. They sent one of their drivers who was going to drive in the car 2 hours out to Orlando, picks up the ECU, drives back. They thrash to try and get the car ready. They roll out just in time. And through all of that, Paul, they go on and win the race. And so totally has nothing to do with BOP. I just love telling that story because it goes to show exactly what motorsport sometimes is all about.
Yeah, it is, and it is such a good story. And you see it time and again. You know, I commentated at Monza. I was fortunate enough to commentate at Monza. Damien Harris has had issues out there, by the way, in his geodesic car. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to commentate out at Monza back in 2023, and one of the teams was running the 991 version of the Porsche Cup car, which by that time was no longer supported by Porsche, and they had a part that was faulty. And so therefore they couldn't take part in qualifying at all, and they were worried whether they would actually take part in the race entirely. And they pulled an all-nighter, drove I think halfway across Europe, got the parts that they needed. No, they drove to Germany, sorry. Got the parts that they needed, came back to Monza, fitted the parts with no testing, raced the car in the race and finished the race. It's incredible what you can do and with these race cars. You think of all of these engineers that, oh well, we just want to warm it up, or we just want to, you know, do a practice session, do something like, make sure that everything's working. Nope, it's got to be in and there for the race, and they can pull it out of the bag.
Sim racing is lovely. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes, as that's a switch, Aaron Lopez gets out of the way a little bit aggressively. I think maybe, is there a slowdown he's trying to clear? It drops him into Alberto Senau's claws, though. He just about gets out in front. Sim racing is great, but sometimes, you know, it gives us perfection, right? In the real world, no two cars are ever going to be identical, just as an example, right? Because they come out of the factory slightly differently. It's just a reality. So when you're developing a setup and you've got a teammate, you can't just copy necessarily always what they're doing. You've got to try and make some decisions based on what you're seeing through data. But yeah, there are just some stories that you can't get necessarily in the world of sim racing that you'll hear in motorsports, and some real heroic efforts by the team behind the scenes. Does not mean that there's not a team behind the scenes in the world of sim racing, the strategists, the engineers that make sure that everything works together, because a a lot of these drivers, if you left strategy and set up to them, I think they'd be a bit lost at sea relative to their competition.
Yeah, and you think of some of the greatest engineers in endurance racing. I mean, I always think of Lena Gard at Audi, the job that she did there on their strategy and engineering side of things. Incredible how she's then be able to take that experience into other automotive sectors as well. So, you know, motorsport can lead to the cars that you end up driving as well, with some of their concepts and some of their designs and ideas and things like that. So it's always a progressively evolving thing, is motorsport, and definitely some of the stories that you hear is absolutely tremendous. I mean, you think some of those engineers, they'll be awake all morning preparing for the race, then awake all the way through the race. If it's a 24-hour race, they'll have been awake nearly like 45 hours. Possibly even 2 days in some cases, and yet they're still able to work at that peak performance and make the right strategy calls at the right time as well.
That's the important thing, right call at the right time. Can't afford to dilly-dally on your decision making. You've got to be decisive. You've got to make sure that when you feel that that time is right, you execute, and you don't wait until it's too late. We're still waiting for touring cars to come down on towards pit lane, but we are closing in on the final hour of racing here to start the iRacing special events schedule. Don't go anywhere here on the iRacing Esports Network. We'll be back with continued coverage of the iRacing Roar.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
Welcome back to RaceBot TV, to the iRacing Esports Network. We're live from the World Center of Racing to kick off another season of iRacing special events, and it all starts with the Roar, presented by SimMotion. Arjuna Kankipati joined alongside by Paul Smith in the commentary booth as we walk you through in towards what is bound to be an exciting 70 minutes left in this race. Strategy still playing itself out. And on our 3 classes of competition, 2 of our classes still very much up for grabs at the front of the field. We're watching the fight for 4th. Theodore Jensen around the outside of Brandon Roseborough makes the move with a bit of assistance clearly from some straight line advantage. And as mentioned, one of our classes, a dominant race leader. Austin Young, 25 seconds clear after 1 hour and 15 odd minutes of racing. There were a couple that threatened to challenge. They got tangled up in incidents, and after that, Young has never looked back. In the GT4 class, Cody Deeth, Sven Haase share the current lead battle, but they are only about 9 seconds in front of Corentin Gunes and a whole host of GT4 cars on a very different strategy. We've got to watch out with traffic behind them. Pascal Stix, Fernando Busquets are battling all the way through the traffic as well. But then in our final class, touring cars, they're finally getting pit stop windows underway. Gonzalo Fabi, Gal Valero, Konstantin Stolzenberg, they're at the front of the field and threatening to run away. And so, Paul, with all of that said, how are you feeling like this race is shaping up? Because 60 started, attrition's definitely played its part. We're down to 45 still left on the lead lap.
Yeah, it's had quite an effect, hasn't it? And it's mainly been those interclass run-ins that have happened there, and definitely it's been a little bit of miscommunication here and there, a little bit of impatience here and there as well, and just some unluckiness, general unluckiness as well, that has caused the majority of the retirements here. We have seen one or two just have big moments on the exit of the Le Mans chicane, which has led to a couple of retirements. So yeah, it's been a tough race. It's been an attritional race. But those that are still out there, they've still got it all to do. And as you mentioned, Austin Young, tremendous job up at the front after the early stages where it was looking like it was going to be a bit close at the front, and then that incident into turn number 6 onto the back onto the oval. That just seemed to give Austin Young that impetus to just run away at the front, and it's certainly working out for him so far.
It's a busy weekend at Daytona, all building up to what is, of course, a busy month tomorrow. Focus will return here on the iRacing Esports Network to the World Center of Racing with the 4th and final round of the IMSA Esports Global Championship. Of course, the Michelin 240. 2 champions to be crowned, the $25,000 prize money to be split as well, and the end of our sunshine swing through Florida. Paul, it's been a fun championship, as you called out so far. One final race, and then let's not forget, next week it all builds to the iRacing Daytona 24. Yeah,
and you're going to see a lot of people who are competing in that IMSA Esports Global Championship taking part in that iRacing Daytona 24 Hours, because for a lot of those teams, they want bragging rights, don't they? They really want to get bragging rights over each other. We know the level of competition, say, between Apex Racing Team, Team Redline, Coanda, BS Competition, Williams Esports. I could just carry on listing team names. You look at the level of competition between them. They all want to get one over the other, don't they?
Absolutely, and as much as I think next week's field's going to be stacked, tomorrow's fields of the Michelin 240 sprinkled with a dose of a couple of Michelin wild cards in the GTP class. Verstappen.com, Gustavo Ariel and Max Verstappen pair up in an Acura GTP. In the GTD class, Scuderia Ferrari HP Esports team join the fun. It's going to be very exciting to see how Ollie Steinbraten and Lorenzo Manfredotti get on in what is their first outing in their new colors. Scuderia Ferrari making a more concerted effort for 2025. In the iRacing world, something to then be reflected a week later in the Daytona 24 as well. So plenty to look forward to. You can catch it all live here on the iRacing Esports Network. Maybe you'll hear Paul and myself a little bit next week across of what will be close to 24 hours of uninterrupted coverage. This race just 2 hours and 24 minutes of slightly interrupted coverage, but we are starting to get towards that final hour. 4 minutes left before the clock will click over to the end of this portion of the race. 60 minutes left to go. Still waiting, Paul, for the touring cars to trickle their way into the box.
Yeah, you could go along in these touring cars and then be able to just fuel up the amount that you need. You think we've got an hour and 4 minutes remaining in this race. We started with 2 hours 24 minutes for this race. So been going an hour and 20 minutes in these TCRs. They can go long. I mean, we see this in at the Nürburgring, don't we? The virtual VLN Championship. How that, the DNLS. Sorry,
you got it.
Title. And you see how long those touring cars could go around there. Stick them on this track, and you think that, wow, these really are frugal, turbocharged motor cars. We should go out and buy one, and that's part of the joy of touring cars, is they're a more attainable car, I would say, of being able to drive the road variants out there on the road, compared to, say, like your GT4s and your GT3s, which are a bit pricier.
I thought consumer advice, Paul Smith was saying, buy a touring car for the road. It's more economical than a road car.
Oh no, these are not economical. Trust me. I've spoken to. Well, I actually, when I was in Monza, I spoke to one of the series organisers from Creventic, and they were there saying that, yeah, the touring cars, the TCRs are about brand new, 120,000 euros at that time, but they cost the same to run as a Porsche Cup car. So the running costs of them is eye-watering for these, even though they are quote unquote just a road car with a roll cage and some special bits.
Yes, I did not realize they were that expensive to run, but I mean, does that just mean I should get a Porsche Cup car for the road? That's
yes.
What I'm hearing from that one. Porsche, I mean, you've got the two commentators of the Porsche Esports Super Cup in the booth. Let's hook us up with a Porsche Super Cup for the road. Back over to your GT4s, where Deeth and Haas are working well together here, Paul. Former teammates, as I did mention. And lap on lap, anywhere from 3-4 tenths a second quicker. Now, yes, they'll give up a bit of time in the pit stop, we do believe, but they've taken what was an 8-second gap about 20 minutes ago and grown it to around 12 seconds. So slowly but surely, they're making some significant ground to building an advantage.
Now, is that the effect of having that lighter fuel load, perhaps?
I think so.
For them, just having that little bit of extra pace, lap on lap, certainly will help you. But then you've got the flip side of, you're then going to have the heavier car for the final stint. So it all balances out. But you're absolutely right. The fact that you're able to pull out that gap, that they've been working together to get that gap pulled out of the front, has been key to this race for Deeth and Hasse. They really do need to work together to move forward.
And I saw a couple of people in the chat saying that they felt a bit surprised that there was a Porsche running so well up towards the front in the class, but maybe a testament to A, Corentin Gunes, B, maybe the actual strength of the Porsche at this level with the way they've set the car up as well. That Baedefer, Lopez, Senau, none of these drivers seem willing to make a move. We'll say, if you're John Baedefer, you're in a bit of a precarious situation, Paul, because he's on a very different strategy to Gunes, Lopez, and Senau. He put less fuel into the car, and so he's going to spend a bit more time in pit lane at some point, probably come into pit lane a little bit earlier potentially as well, and so no man's land relative to three of the cars he's battling around. And just wondering, if we had the threat of rain, the rain that you talked about watching in the split last night, Paul, this would be a very, very different sort of a talk.
What was really incredible about that, and I'm just going to quickly touch on it, was last night it was a very light rain, and there were people, including our team, in the first stop, took the wet tyres. And it just didn't work out. The track, if you were able to keep the heat in those slick tyres, this track gave you so much grip, and it wasn't until that second pit stop in the prototypes that meant that they were able to then go onto the wet tyres and make them work. But it was an incredible, the mixing strategies last night was fantastic to watch and see from the outside. But these drivers, I mean, they're all busy tripping over each other in GT4. That isn't going to help them be able to move forward to Deeth and Hasse.
No, Alexander Peregrina gets the slide up to fourth, but as a result of that, John Baedefer drops backwards. Got some traffic slicing through as well, but the train from what is still third back to ninth position holds strong. And once again, the last lap, another 7-8 tenths lost.
Oh.
That's Enrico Trenti. He's already 2 laps down relative to the rest of the LMP3 field that loops it at turn 6. At least a bit of a safer rejoin than what we had before is all you can say. Touring cars, pit stops. We've got 58 minutes to go. Gonzalo Fabi's coming by himself. And Paul, this is one thing I was noting. Listening to both Gaio Valero, Konstantin Stolzenberg, they've been doing some heavy fuel saving on numerous occasions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've been working the strategy and trying to get as much fuel out of that as possible. So yeah, so definitely we're going to be seeing them heading into pit road in the next lap or so. And you just want to be able to have it so that you can take as little fuel as possible in that pit stop and work it through. But yes, through they go. You can just hear that just backing off into the braking zone, onto the oval once again, and these two at the front then, Stolzenberg and Valero. And you think how long I've been commentating on Gaio Valero over the years, and he just keeps on delivering for his teams. One of those real sort of solid workhorse drivers.
Absolutely, and a whole bunch of cars as well. The Apex Racing team going through a bit of a transition in many ways right now. Kevin Ellis Jr. announces leaving, part of the backbone of the team in the last almost decade at this point. And so it's on the likes of Gaio Valero to step up to fill that void. And so very excited to see how that will end up playing out. Valero, one that we've seen quite frequently focusing on these touring cars. He will stay out one lap longer than the World Sim Racing butt kicker entry though. Stolzenberg into pit lane. Gaio Valero, pole sitter, goes one lap longer than his competition.
Well, remember, balance performance adjustment, Honda 1% smaller fuel tank than the rest of the TCR field. So we'll get to finally see whether that has a big effect on those cars. But Aaron Lopez right now behind Alexander Peregrina for the final step of the podium. And that gap to the front two, it's still growing, isn't it? It's 14.2 seconds now.
I think it could end up being between Cody Deep and Sven Haase. That strategy call has just really worked out for them. And being decisive has helped. They're only two to have picked that specific call. A little contact in through one. As they unload the cars off the banking, Peregrina gets a shove from Lopez behind. Now Corin Tengunez, the one that's sitting and doing some fuel saving. Remember, all these GT4 cars have to stop again. There's no question about that. The only question is how much time do they spend in pit lane? And for those that packed the car up with fuel in the first pit stop sequence, could they be aggressive and maybe take no tires and just make it a splash and dash? That's what we're looking forward to seeing. These are the two, though, hoping to keep everyone else out of touch.
Yeah, and they'll be focused forward. They'll want to have a bare knuckle drag down fight in the car park of the pub at 3 o'clock in the morning on kick-out time, but they'll wait. They'll wait for their opportunity to have that fight as more traffic coming past them. But again, just lift it off throttle. Let the car just roll into the corner. And that's the key to fuel saving in any car, is letting the car roll through the corners, carrying the speed so you're not braking too much, you're not then having to accelerate too much. As Valero taking tyres at his pit stop. Miguel Freitas, former teammate of mine, the Tame Iberian, he gets his moment of glory in the sun. He's up to the lead, but that's all because he's still stayed out.
Tame Iberian sounds like a walking contradiction in some ways. Always excitement in many ways, but as Miguel Freitas does take the lead, it's a bit of a swap, I think, in strategy here. 5 seconds short of a Stolzenberg in the pit lane. So Gonzalo Fabi no longer in contention. Here's Gaio Valero. How long will he end up sitting on pit lane? The magic number is around 34.4 seconds. 36.5, 2 seconds longer than Konstantin Stolzenberg. But is it going to work out in terms of dropping him directly into the path of the World Sim Racing car, who's working through turn 1 now? Valero still waiting to be released from the pit limiter.
Valero, I think, should be in front by a comfortable margin here. Not the biggest of gaps. There you see it, the imposing figure of that Honda Civic front end. And, well, Valero thought he'd escaped Stolzenberg, but Stolzenberg goes, not yet. I'm coming back here, sunshine.
You can see the difference on the box. About 2.1 seconds, but only 1.8 seconds between the actual pit lane cones. So Valero doing a better job, and now he's got to get the tires up to temperature as well. He's going to squeeze the Honda Civic a little bit wide, but it's a battle, and the warm tires for the Civic work out well. The crossover, the switchback. Stolzenberg's got the drive and the shorter distance, and so will take over the net race lead. But this ain't done. 52 minutes left to go. These two will go out back and forth, and with Gonzalo Fabi 4.8 seconds behind, Paul, they're not going to be too worried about bringing him into the equation.
No, not all. It sits between these two then. TCR. I don't see them fighting too hard though at this stage. I think you wait until around the final 15 minutes or so when you know what you're going to do, and then push on and start fighting each other. But right now it's a case of just sit there, bide your time, be patient. If you go Valero, just sit behind and do that. Even more fuel saving and looking after your tyres, so you can then push on to the end. But I tell you what, he's come right up to the back of that Civic, but he's staying behind.
I think this is where we'll see a little bit of the intelligence from these drivers, not needing to force the issue. They'll be a bit more patient, be a bit more willing to hold station, and maybe reserve the battle for the final 20 or so minutes of this race. You know, it's much like they do say in the real world as well. Just stay in contention, stay on the lead lap going into the final hour of the Rolex 24. And you might still have a chance without the safety cars and things end up playing out. See a couple of comments, Paul, from people that were in some of the splits last night, where they were saying it was difficult with the rain that they had, because it was, you know, flipping back and forth between dry tires being the best, wet tires being the best as well, and never really stabilizing in one window for any period of time.
Yeah, and it's the nature of the iRacing weather system, isn't it? You get that percentage chance of precipitation in the forecast heading into the event, and well, it's how it pans out. It's not all going to be exactly the same in each split of the race, in each server of this race. So you might have a little bit of rain happen earlier in one split than another. You may have no rain at all, like we're seeing here today. So you know, for anyone who's not happy about the fact that they had precipitation in their race and there's none here in this one, it's the nature of weather, I'm afraid.
And I guess, you know, for everyone who was unhappy, there's someone that's unhappy in this top split that there is no rain, right? Like, yeah. That's unfortunately the other thing. And so, you know, it goes back to what I was saying slightly earlier about sim racing is often great because it makes things perfect. But racing is about maximizing perfection in an imperfect world, right? And finding all the ways of going faster. So, yeah.
I mean, how many times do we commentate on series, and we'll, you know, in private leagues or even in championships with big prize money, and one of the first things that you'll hear from either a team manager or a driver is, oh, but what's the weather setup for this race, and what's the servers going to be like? You know, what's the settings for it? Because they want to practice to that nth degree in that perfect, exact weather. Well, I'm sorry, but we've got to get used to a case of, well, it could be this. Here's the forecast, but it could be different.
This is the other thing about rain as well, right? We added rain last year, and then I had some talks with some people, and it was like, ooh, let's get rain in every special event. But I was talking to them, I went, but what makes rain really interesting is when it's variable, right? It's not, if it's raining a constant amount and everyone knows how much it's going to rain, where it's going to pool, etc., etc., then there's nothing that's changing on a lap-by-lap basis. What makes the rain so fun is the dynamic element of it, the fact that every time you go back to the corner, it might not be the same, as Alberto Senna apparently forgets how wide turn 1 is and brushes the wall very briefly. You can't say the walls moved there, unfortunately, Alberto. It's not like that's happened, but yeah, no. All I will say is I am terrible at driving in the iRacing rain. So I'm one of those people that probably would prefer for it to be dry. There's a small chance I'll do next week's iRacing Daytona 24, and I'm hoping I'm in a dry split if I do it.
Yeah, I just don't have the experience in the rain, and that's something that you have to build. But I'm not one of these drivers. I'm going to throw a little bit of shade at some of the community here. If I see that it's going to be raining in a particular week of a championship that I run in, I'm not just going to sit there and go, well, I'm not racing in that. No, I'm racing in it, because you need to learn, and you need to have that experience to get good in the rain. So many times I hear people turning around and saying, oh, I don't like the rain, so I just don't race in it. Well, I'm sorry, but in these 24-hour events, it may not rain in races, but when it comes to that one race that it does rain, Nürburgring, suddenly you're going to be floundering like a fish out of water.
Me is what you're describing. So yes, no. And my team want to drive the GTP as well. So that even more danger, where you put hybrid power in my hands. It sounds like a good idea. No, I promise you it is not. We're going to see the GT4 pit stop window opening. Patrick Hingston was amongst the first to be scheduled. That's Dylan Burse that's apparently blown an engine. I got concerned for a second that it might be Cody Deeth, but no, it's a different Eclipse SimSport car. But Paul, we knew that all the GT4s had to make another pit stop. This will give us that sense for how long it needs to be.
Yeah, and with 46 minutes remaining, it's not going to be a full service, but it's certainly going to be a longer service than those that will come along later on in the stint. Having that patience there. Up on the jacks as well, getting tyres fitted to that car. May not go for the full set, may go for, say, a pair of rears, or even the right side tyres, isn't it, that take the hardest hammering around this track. Although it's not the worst for tyre wear, is it, around this track?
No, I think, the right sides take a bit more load on the banking, that is for sure, but definitely not as bad as maybe some other ovals in particular, given how things work out. This is what we were talking about earlier, with the pit lane now technically extending all the way to these green cones. Finally, you can hit off the pit lane limiter and release yourself up to racing speed, and Patrick Hingston emerges into some clean air. That's somewhat important. So 45.1 seconds for him, and we'll keep an eye on how long the pit stop's going to end up being for some of those other competitors. Still expecting that potentially there are some thinking of just a splash and dash, and might even be thinking of not taking tires in the final trip down the pit lane. This, though, we've got two GT4 leaders up towards the very front.
And I don't expect to see these two taking tyres in that. I say that. They, of course, took a little bit less fuel, didn't they, in their pit stop? Although it's only about 9 seconds, wasn't it, difference between them and Peregrina. No, not Peregrina, sorry, Aaron Lopez and Corentin Guinness out there, as Austin Young from the overall race lead heads onto pit road now with an interesting helmet, shall we say.
Yeah, I've avoided any comment about that so far this race. but I'm glad it
Oh,
didn't.
that's the other comment I'm making.
I'm glad it didn't miss anyone else's attention as well. He is the only LMP3 driver in this time around. So Francis McGinn takes the race lead, but again, Austin Young is so far out front. 44 minutes left to go. Stay out of trouble. This race victory likely to be his. GT4 still very interesting. Touring car, it's still between Gao Valero, Konstantin Stolzenberg. That's going to be a little bit of a fight in the final 10 minutes, you'd assume, in the touring car category. Might be some questions about how that BOP might favor one of those cars in the final 10 minutes, but both Valero and Stolzenberg are leaving themselves in a position in which they can still fight. And these GT4 drivers, by the way, Paul, haven't really been keeping my eye on it, but I've just noticed 15 seconds is now that advantage, so it's almost doubled since they came into pit lane for Sven Haase and Cody Deeth, their gap behind to those chasing them down.
Yeah, it's been an imperious drive, and don't forget Peregrina in third place in that McLaren there that we're seeing right now. Took a shorter pit stop as well, so he's had to work his way through Lopez and Guinness and Senau, who was our early GT4 race leader. He's had to work his way through. Well, he's going to drop back when he takes a longer pit stop this second time around compared to those three drivers. So it's interesting to see how those lap times haven't been there for Lopez, Guinness and Senau compared to the race leaders. But now it's still a couple of tenths per lap quicker that the race leaders are able to do.
And it's a couple of tenths that really do start to add up at the end of the day once you start to tick them away. This is a race where we're only expecting 80 or so laps, 85 maybe. And once you get to the Daytona 24 and the almost, it's just shy of 1,000 laps that will do, but in excess of 850, almost 900 plus laps. A tenth here and there does really start to add up. More LMP3 pit stops. Francis McGinn from the race lead. He's followed in by Brandon Roseborough, by Theodore Jensen, as now they wait to drop and roll off and away once again. Austin Young back out onto track behind Jan Sentikowski in the Team Hoisingveld entry, but again, 40-odd seconds his advantage heading into the pit lane sequence. He's just got to stay out of trouble, and if you believe in the commentator's curse, well, Austin Young has got 26, 27 laps to prove us wrong here, Paul.
Yeah, he certainly has, and prove his teammate as well wrong.
Oh!
Right as we say it, there you go. It's one little mistake. I mean, it was a big enough gap that he had before the pit stops, but that puts a little bit of heat into those tyres that he's going to have to, and also a bit of dirt and debris offline that he's going to have to work off those tyres, but he should still be in the lead overall after the pit stops.
I mean, it's just the timing, right? It's just the timing. I mean, it couldn't have been any better. It's, again, the lack of downforce. It's a relatively bumpy braking zone down at the Western Horseshoe. He's lucky that there's no one oncoming. He's able to light up the rear tires and get himself out of that pretty quickly, but here's the look on board.
I think he just gets slightly offline. The lock-up of the car in front makes him compromise, and as soon as you do that, around you go. And well, back at it, and still no damage to the car, just a bit of damage to ego maybe.
Yeah, no, the ego has been sufficiently bruised, to which I would assume Austin Young is going to take any risk out of the remaining 40 minutes of this race.
He'll be fine.
Put it out of your mind.
I say that he'll be fine, but I think his teammates will probably give him a little bit of stick over that one. Going, come on.
And that wasn't his
out
outlap.
lead.
He doesn't even have the outlap excuse. That was one lap after. His tires should have been a little bit more warm.
Yeah, they should have been, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's all words. You've just got to say and just hold the hand up and go, yeah, no, that's what my mistake.
Yep, the message has come through from Andrew Langham. Slight difference in downforce level. Sentikowski may be running a bit more downforce, and so, or a little less downforce potentially, and just misjudging, and fortunately no contact, and able to minimize the impact. his teammate, Austin Young's teammate, John Badefer in the GT4 class into pit lane alongside DJ Alessandrini. Claudio Max going to follow them in as well. Final trip down based on Patrick Hingston. Let's not forget, he was stationary for 45.1 seconds. I'm expecting those cars, 40 seconds or so, to be up on the jacks before they're off and rolling once more.
Well, with Hingston, it seemed to be 45 seconds for 45 minutes. Because he did come out with 45 minutes remaining in the race. So going by that irrational theory, it should be 38 seconds or so in the pit box for those couple of drivers. And they proved me wrong by going slightly longer.
Well, you yourself said it was slightly irrational, but I'll just say I saw the logic in what you were doing. It made sense to me. I was picking up what you were putting down. I haven't done much racing in the GT4, which is also kind of where I sometimes struggle with the fuel and the strategy. Is that, you know, you talked about the DNLS, the Digital Nürburgring Endurance Series, that often has races which fall between traditional windows. You know, we have a 3.5 hour race length as an example, and so it's always interesting in this GT4. Lighter cars do tend to be a bit of an advantage based on what I've seen there, and so it was quite interesting seeing, you know, Lopez, Gunez, and Senau top the car off with fuel in the first stint of the race. What Sven Haase and Cody Deeth have kind of done is maybe a little bit more aligned to what I've seen in the DNLS in particular, and so last time by, gap between first and third, 16 or so seconds, as Alexander Peregrina brings the fiercely forward number 9 into the box for the final time today.
Is it a case of just balancing out the two different stints to try and be lighter more often than the other cars who have got to carry that heavier weight? Have to wait and see how it balances out, but I do feel that Haase and Deeth have pulled an absolute blinder here so far. And with that gap at the front of GT4, 15 seconds, it's sort of just petered out to around about 15 seconds, hasn't it, for them at the front? Although it is ahead of Lopez, who of course is another one that was on a... Oh no, he wasn't. It's just changed, of course, because Peregrina's come onto pit road. He was one that was on the lower fuel load. So yeah, Lopez, Gunez, Senau, and Fluke as well, who's just off the back of them by a few seconds. They're the ones, they'll be looking ahead and going, maybe we've not quite worked this one out right.
And again, it's what makes the strategy so interesting. I've just seen another car, by the way, with a drive-through penalty. So another one has racked up 20 incident points. You can do that by running off the track 20 times or hitting another car with enough contact 5 times. Or any sort of combo in between those two. I'm expecting for many of these cars it's more a mix of the two, and I'm expecting potentially by the time we get to the final 10-15 minutes there will be some of these drivers that will be a bit concerned. It's very easy, Paul, through the bus stop to run wide, put a foot off into the grass, and bam, that's 1x right there, and you do that 20 times over the course of the race. It's a drive-through penalty.
You think how many laps that these drivers are completing in this race as well. You know, the GT4s are on, what, like 58 of their race, so you're absolutely right. Just wheel onto the dirt there in the bus stop chicane, and 20 laps, you've picked up those instant points. As I can tell you that the prototypes, some of the rest of them are now onto pit road for their final pit stop. Jan Sinkowski, by the way, staying out yet another lap, so he's gone longer than some of the other prototypes.
It's not the first time that we've seen Jan do some pretty impressive fuel saving. Maybe it goes back as well to the different downforce that he was running relative to Austin Young. That was one thing that was maybe cited as a influencing factor in the incident where the race leader had that slight moment. And so just something that does help out. If you're running lower downforce, you have to spend a little less time on throttle through a lot of the corners. And so it is reflected in the usage of the right foot, the usage of your fuel as well. You can see that the leading GT4 pairing onto the banking through NASCAR's 3 and 4 already. Now, as the 3 cars behind them cycle through the chicane. So it's a quite significant advantage that they have right now, Paul. And when do you pull the trigger and start to maybe battle a little bit here? Because, you know, your Sven, your Cody, you might not want to do exactly the same as the other driver now on pit lane. You may want to try and pull yourself out of contention.
I mean, I called it earlier on after they'd pitted. Work together until that final 15 minutes is what I said, and then look at what the size of the gap is, and then, you know, have your 3 a.m. bare knuckle fight in the pub car park with somebody saying, "Don't do it, Gary." As we look at what's happened to Peregrina, and that's down the inside goes one, doesn't see the other one making the move, and that's miscommunication there. That's nothing malicious, that's nothing intentional or anything like that. That's a case of one GT4 seeing one prototype and the TCR getting involved in that as well.
That was Matthias Pentila, not the first bit of contact today either for him. Bit of a frustrating one, to say the very least. Closing in on just under 30 minutes to go. Closing in on having 2 hours complete. They're 3 wide with traffic for the GT4 lead. They'll pass the touring car entry from Scherer Esports and slide their way on through. Sven Haase, Cody Deeth, still 16 now seconds in front of Aaron Lopez, Corentin Gunes, and Alberto Senau. Just waiting for them to make their final trips down onto pit lane. Touring cars, still Guy Valero that leads. He's holding Stolzenberg at arm's length right now, which in touring cars, Paul, this is a pretty good effort from the Apex Racing number 5.
I do think that Stolzenberg is doing a little bit of sitting behind as well. I did some of the TCR open races on Tuesday that were around here to give people a bit of seat time around the track. I think that's one of the good things that iRacing does, is before one of the big special events, get some of the big series that the cars that are going to be competing in to go around this track to get people used to it, get them seat time. And with the touring cars, if you were in the slipstream, you could work together and then push on towards the out of the bus stop chicane, using that slingshot and the slipstream to then carry yourself across the line. I wouldn't be surprised if you see these two absolutely neck and neck across the line to finish this race.
Bit of a drag race would be pretty fun, that's for sure. Byron Pierce make that, I think, 3 or 4 drivers now with the drive-through penalty, so those numbers starting to climb, and it's a 30-second hit for a drive-through penalty here, so it's a not insubstantial hit as well to be unfortunately dinged with in the closing stages. We talked about the level of attrition. 60 drivers did start this race. We are left with, I mean, you can argue probably 43 drivers left on the leading lap at this point. But Paul, we've still got around 50 cars out there and circulating, which it's good to see, including someone like Ian Chenguven, who got tangled up at the very start of this race, still out there and continuing to the very end.
Yeah, and it's so easy for people to just say, as the GT4 race leaders coming to pit road, by the way, it's so easy for drivers to just have that mentality of, oh, well, I'm not going to win the race, so that's it. Ian Chan is some... Oh, missing a pit box there.
That's going to cost him a second or two.
No tyres, though, for Cody Deeth.
And maybe that's now a reaction to missing the box, as he doesn't think he can afford the time. So he's going to have to do, what, an hour and 20 minutes on tyres, which is not asking for too much from these GT4 Michelins, if we're being honest. Maybe just a reflection from Sven that if you've got the tyres, let's take them. You are going to have to warm them up, though, so we'll see how this all cycles off. Even with all of that, because Cody Deeth does not switch tyres, off and away slightly quicker for him, Sven Haase loses time in the sequence.
Deeth needs to try and pull away a gap whilst his tyres are warmer. That's going to be a key to Cody's race here for the final 29 minutes of this race. Sven needs to get those tyres up to temperature as quickly as possible so that he can then push on and keep with Deep, so that then when it gets to the final 10 minutes, you're then going to be able to push on.
Sorry, Paul. I should. It was not very professional of me to exclaim like that, but watch this replay.
Okay. Are both drivers?
Yes. Both drivers end up missing their marks here. I thought it was just Cody Deeth. No, Sven Haase does so, and maybe a little bit more egregiously in terms of time lost.
Wow. It just goes to show. I mean, there was, what, a tenth of a second in the box between the two of them. But cone to cone, Haase was a second longer from cone to cone. So, yeah, definitely he will not appreciate that. The problem for Deeth here now is he's not got far enough ahead to be breaking the slipstream, I don't think. Or is he? Oh, it's on that borderline, isn't it? And once Sven gets the benefit of that newer rubber, that's where he will then be quicker through places like this, through the Le Mans chicane, through that infield section at the start of the lap as well. So it's going to be difficult for Deeth to hold on if he can do. I was just going to touch quickly, talking about Gouvan as those two came onto pit road. He's somebody who has raced at the highest level of racing, or certainly up there in the top echelons of racing in terms of endurance racing. He's got that right mentality of, yep, we've had an incident, but let's carry on and push on because we've got things to learn still. And I think too often in sim racing, people just go, I can't win, so that's it, I'm throwing the dummy out and the toys out of the pram and I'm just going to quit. Too often people don't carry on in that race and learn for future events what can happen and what they need to do in the future.
They say you learn more from failure than success, right?
Yes.
But I'm not a very wise man, Paul, so how do you explain that one?
Well, Niki Lauda. I mean, Niki Lauda was the one who famously, at a sports event, he was awarded a trophy. And he, in his speech, was saying, all of you who didn't win this, you will learn more from not winning this than I have from winning this. And that's what top athletes and top people in general in life as well. If you don't have failure in your life, you end up then making the same mistakes that eventually leads to a bigger failure further down the line. Whereas if you do have knockbacks and setbacks that challenge you, you can then learn from those mistakes and be a better person going forward in your future life and be potentially more successful.
Yeah, you still haven't explained why I'm not a wise man with all the failure that I've experienced on the racetrack, but that's okay.
Well, that also means that you have to actually learn from those mistakes, though, aren't you?
Damn it, Paul! You mean I've got to go to school again?
Hey, I'm sat here in this commentary box with you, my friend. So
fair enough. No, that is very true.
Black.
There's a little bit of concertina up in the Western Horseshoe as the GT4 leaders get past. We're keeping an eye on Cody Deeth and Sven Haase. Lap time wise, they're now losing a couple of tenths to the leaders in the GT4 class. So at one point they had the advantage, now they're giving it up slightly, but it will be cycled back towards them at the very end of the race, you'd assume. Touring car leaders right on top of one another again. And this is where we can maybe get a sense, Paul, for how strong each of these cars is. You talked about the differences in BOP on board with the Honda, which has of course got the draft right now trying to pull itself towards the line, but it's still not really closing. If this was the final lap, Gallo Valero would be feeling pretty good.
Well, don't you say that, but it's here. It's at this point where you really get that slipstream. You're going to see it. You've got to be close enough, though, coming out of the bus stop chicane, out of the Le Mans chicane. That's the tricky part. The thing that helps Stolzenberg there, though, is that Honda chassis. It is a really strong chassis there that's got some good turn on it compared to the Audi. The Audi can be a little bit cumbersome at times in some of the corners, so you've got to use that chassis advantage from the Honda, but the Audi has got a bit of grunt, and the different gearing of that Audi as well can be advantageous in other ways as well.
It's always interesting you talk about the touring cars when the Audi was available both as the DSG and the sequential versions. One infinitely more popular and successful than the other, but one also a little bit cheaper to get out there and race. And I'm sure in terms of running costs as well. Hasn't been much LMP3 fighting to speak of, but I think we're closing in on the final 24 minutes of this race. Officially 2 hours complete in this iRacing Roar presented by SimMotion. A couple of little things starting to develop, including the fact that Francis McGinn might start to increasingly feel the pressure from behind as Brandon Roseborough in the second of the Hydra Race Geodesic racing cars works its way forward. Especially when you have a pretty poor run through the bus stop like that, and move made easily, McGinn goes high.
Yeah, has to serve a slow down penalty, and people might be seeing that thinking, well, why has he gone high there? Well, if you think about it, you've got a greater distance to run on the high line there, and you're trying to serve that slow down penalty, and you're trying to serve it in as least impactful way as possible. For you, but also in getting that high line, it means that you can just feather off the throttle just that little bit to help assist you serve that slow down penalty. And you'll look right there, that's where he gets it. Has to move up high to keep out the way, and it's a little bit of a safety thing there as well. You're serving that slow down penalty, you're getting offline.
And I wonder as well, was there a bit of a component of the slight technical issue that you saw impacting him? Corentin Gunez, the Porsche, sips its fuel at the front of the GT4 field, and so Senau, Lopez, Fluke, they're all in, leave just one more driver to pit in the GT4 class, and we're about to find out where it drops these drivers relative to Cody Deeth, to Sven Haase, who are working their way towards pit entry right now. 24.1 seconds for Lopez, 6 seconds quicker in the box. It's not going to get him alongside by any means, but Paul, the gap's going to come down.
It's certainly going to come down, but what's impressed me is Deeth has kept that gap to Haase for the time being. In their particular fight as well. There you see on board with Deeth already past pit exit into the International Horseshoe. There's Haase going a little bit deep into the International Horseshoe. But they're out of pit road right now, and they're about, what, 6 seconds back from Haase for Lopez.
It's a very, very impressive strategic call from Cody Deeth, from Sven Haase. The only two drivers to go on this strategy. And for Lopez, for Senau, 6 seconds doesn't sound like a big gap, but with just over 20 minutes to go, time is running down. I don't think they're going to have the chance to be able to really fight. Cody Deeth, like Paul calls out, has done a sterling job. 1.5 seconds just on the edge of the draft range to hold on to what might be the race lead here. Corentin Gunez is going to head down to pit lane for what is the final pit stop in the GT4 class. And Paul, he's hoping it's a good one.
It'll have to be a good one, that Porsche. Well, first things is that he did actually get it into the pit box safely, so that's good for him. Now, Gunez, I've known him as a touring car guy. He is incredible in touring cars, but he's moved on to GT4s, and we've seen the pace that he's had here today in that Porsche. One of the very few, I think, in fact, the only Porsche that was out there in GT4 in that 718 Cayman. And there goes Cody Deeth into turn one, and still Gunez sat on that pit limiter.
It was 22 seconds stationary, so it's going to end up meaning that Gunez should have about 2 seconds in front of Lopez, but he is going to be 4-5 seconds adrift from Sven Haase, and Sven Haase now 1.2 off the back of the Mercedes that leads. He's in the draft, he's there. It could come down to two drivers above 10,000 I rating. Once upon a time, there were only a handful. You could count the number of drivers above 10K I rating. on one hand. Now there's a few more, but Deeth and Haase at the very top of the club, that is for sure. Francis McGinn loses out to Brandon Roseborough. These two having a bit of a drag-out fight in the closing stages. Paul, with 20 minutes left to go, things have finally shaped on out, and it's only the touring car lead where we're seeing a wheel-to-wheel fight in these final laps.
I still don't think you can write off Sven Haase with that fresh rubber compared to Cody Deeth, but as time runs by, if Haase cannot get close enough to get in the draft, then that will mean that Deeth will feel more and more comfortable, more and more confident of their decision. But yeah, these two in your prototypes, we've seen how McGinn running, I mean, they're both pitted on the same lap. McGinn was a few seconds longer in the pit box compared to Roseborough. So these two should be on similar fuel. This is pure out-and-out pace, and it was McGinn that we saw did not take tyres, did he?
I think you're right. We'll keep an eye on how things work for him. Those two prototypes have just slid their way on through on what is now the fight for 7th in the GT4 class. Jack Sedgwick's jumped in front of Alexander Peregrina. You've got Timo Hayden, John Baderford, DJ Alessandrini in the mix as well. Remember, if you're just joining us for the first time, we've finished off around 2 hours and 7 minutes of racing. This is a solo event. Drivers must complete this event by themselves. 17 more minutes to push. By no means, Paul, is this a long endurance stint. We'll see some drivers next week in the iRacing Daytona 24 go as long as 6, maybe 10 hours in a single stint. But when you're fighting for 2 hours and 24 minutes in draft and making strategic decisions, these drivers are going to be feeling drained right about now.
I'll be honest with you, Andrew, the 3 stints is about the length that I can go at my age now. So it's incredible when you see these drivers pull these mega stints of 6 to 10 hours. I mean, the amount of times that we've seen people try and solo 24-hour events, and the fact that they're able to go for so long is a testament to human perseverance and that. But you won't find me doing that. I think 3 stints is my limit before the body says you need to go take a break.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I still remember, what was it, 2022? So now we're going 3 years back at this point, but Govan Keeney did a 10-hour stint in the GTD class and left the car in the lead of the race after 10 hours, which, I mean, I'm still speechless in some ways thinking about it. That car didn't stay in the lead, I think, for the remainder of the race. But yeah, he did his job for 10 hours. I think the longest stint that I've ever done, I've done a few 4-hour VLN races back in the day.
Yeah.
I've done some quad stints at Le Mans as well, but those would have been in prototype, so would have been just shy of 4 hours. So I think that's about the same, Paul. I think 3-4 stints, and after that I lose my semblance of control.
See, the thing is, and this is what I think makes me impressed with drivers who can do 6-hour races at the Nordschleife. Doing a quad stint at, say, Spa or here is one thing, but to do a quad stint at the Nordschleife, at Nürburgring, with the focus that you have to give that track, the respect you have to give that track, is another, and that's where I do have that respect for those drivers who are able to do those 6-hour stints on their own there. And THR Sim Sports in the YouTube chat, yeah, that is the reason for me as well.
I mean, I've got some stories about, you know, doing some of the 4 and 6-hour VLN races, and you know, you'll get to a pit stop. This, fortunately, was in the time when tires and fuel were done separately on GT3 cars. So you had about 60-odd seconds to run to the bathroom, do whatever you needed to do, wash your hands, most importantly, and then get back into your sim rig. And I don't think I ever lost too much time. I probably lost a little bit of time, but you know.
So,
Fun.
story time with Paul, very quickly. With this event, the iRacing Roar, it used to be, instead of the TCRs, it used to be the Kia Optima that used to race in this event. And that car, it is simulated that it's using jerry cans, so using the fuel jug to fill up the fuel tank manually. So every, I think it was 3 gallons, it would stop, simulate them changing fuel can,
Right.
and then start fueling again. So it would take 1 minute and 49 seconds to do a full service on that car, tyres and full fuel tank. That would only last about 45 minutes as well, by the way, with that fuel tank. And it was enough time to go away and stroll to the bathroom, not rush.
Leisurely.
Stroll to the bathroom, go do a hygiene, come back, sit down, and still have about 20 seconds left before you're then back out again.
There's none of this, you know, Jensen Button to Fernando Alonso, I'm doing something in your seat that... you know, that happens in the world of racing. It's just not, it's not good form to do that to a teammate in a 24-hour race. I guess the benefit of being in the sim world is you don't have to share a seat with anyone that might desecrate the thing that you then have to sit on and drive around for a couple of hours. 12 minutes to go. And, well, we do have, I think Paul called it, 2 different and fun fights that will go all the way to the end. GT4s and touring cars. Very much victories on the line. Austin Young, I did see a question, never ended up getting pressured, but still made a mistake despite that. So he leads by 17 seconds. It could have been 30 seconds or so, if not for one slight slip up in traffic.
He was under pressure for about 12 minutes. and then an incident happened in traffic, and then, oh well, I'm away at the front.
There is the black and gold, Stetson wearing Austin Young, and that's a helmet. It's the only comment that Paul and I are gonna leave on this. It's a choice of helmet. Fight between a couple of other LMP3 cars. Felipe Barreto was one of those that had a drive-through penalty, and now he's dragging out this fight with Nick Thiessen in the number 59. Nick's one of those people, by the way. There's a lot of hard work behind the scenes that make all of these broadcasts happen. If you're ever wondering how RaceSpot gets the graphics on screen, how the timing all works, well, Nick's coded up about 50% of that. And so, you know, not only is he a great programmer, but it turns out he's a better race car driver than us as well, Paul.
And he's usually the person that we shout at when
stuff broken,
when something breaks, and it's like, Nick, help! But yeah, he does so much work for the sim racing community as well as racing as well, and to see him in this race, 10th place. I mean, he's gained 8 places from where he started, so he's been on a positive charge there. Not what I used there. Positive charge. Thank you very much.
I saw it.
I'm available for weddings and other events. But yeah, definitely he's certainly having a good, solid race out there.
I thought as soon as I get rid of Joey Tebman in the broadcast booth, I thought I'm safe from puns. Paul Smith had to make sure, no, 1 pun to start off the year at the very least.
You've got Peter Mackay tomorrow as well, so.
That's true. That is true. There is the 2 leading fights that we've got brewing, as that clock's going to tick away, and we'll be left with 10 minutes to go in the iRacing Roar presented by SimMotion to kick off 2025. Gar Valero's got a couple more car lengths on Konstantin Stolzenberg in the fight below. That's touring cars. Remember, Audi RS3, Honda Civic, 2 very different machines. They make their lap time in some slightly different ways as well. Curious to see how that plays out. Top of your screen, it's Mercedes versus Mercedes. 2 identical cars. The only difference might be, Paul, how the drivers have set them up.
Yeah, fresh tyres versus worn tyres as well. That's the differences between the 2 of them as well. Both missing their pit box, as we saw. Corentin Guinez, it's worth pointing out, has just been... He's not closing up quick enough, but he is there in case these 2 get together So don't write him out if something happens between these two at the front of GT4.
That is what they call the commentator's curse, right? Where's the crash?
No comment.
I'm just saying, based on the luck that we've had earlier today, poor Austin Young. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about putting the pressure on him with a commentator's curse, and what happens? He has a half-lazy spin. So if there was going to ever be a time to prove Lewis McLeod wrong that the commentator's curse does indeed exist, then it would have been there. And twice on one broadcast, it would have been undeniable, undisputable evidence that the commentator's curse is real. Here we go. His Sven Haase had enough, though, of sitting behind. He's going to shimmy up high. LMP3 car is going to fight its way down low, going to push him out wide. He's in the marbles. It gives Cody Deeth a bit more breathing room once more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's the fact that Sven got forced out onto those marbles, and you just introduce a ton of understeer there on corner exit through turn 1. Tricky enough corner as it is, but to then add on to that the fact of marbles coming onto the car just makes life a little bit more tricky. Oh, contact! Contact there for Jack Sedgwick! And also the 48 as well, so big drama in your GT4 field. That's John Beaufort.
And, well, this is uncomfortable. Bashes the rear end into the wall, just trying to turn it around. And he'll finally find a gap in which to do so. DJ Alessandrini, as a result of that incident, I can tell you, has got a drive-through penalty. So, again, remember, there are going to be some drivers that are flirting with that drive-through penalty. And the fog by no means is lifted as we've worked through. But let's see if we can lift the cloud of confusion. What happens down to turn number 1?
It's two side by side. Third cut sticks the nose in. That was the impulse car. And the 48 getting on the anchors gets hit from the rear, I believe, there. So that was Timo Hayden who made the initial contact. You see the 48 get on the anchors, and the car behind doesn't react to what's happening in front there. Oh dear, that was all a little bit messy, was that?
I will say, I feel like Betafer might already have been, that car was looking like it had lost adhesion. It was already going around by the time the contact was made. I think that might have just sealed the fate, though, at the end of the day. So, that was brewing up as maybe a little bit of a fight to the end. No longer. It means once more we focus back towards the leading groups. GT4 well and truly on top of one another in the touring car equation. Let's go back in and check in with Gal Valero, with Konstantin Stolzenberg as well. Stolzenberg's done a good job to bring the margin back down as we get ready to head into the final 6 minutes of the race.
They've not got too much traffic heading their way as well. They will get a little bit involved in that, but I think they're pretty free of traffic at the moment for these two fighting it out. And again, in fact, they've got that GT4 lead coming up behind them. That's the next fight that's leading up behind them. So only about 6 seconds a lap difference between the GT4s and the TCRs. So the GT4s have a little bit of a longer braking zone compared to the touring cars out there. So it can catch people out in the TCR class if they're running close behind GT4s.
We've also got a fight for what is now 4th on track. Aaron Lopez and Alberto Senau, the pole sitter in that McLaren. They've lost ground to Corentin Gunes. Gunes doing a good job to hold on to what would be 3rd. He finished, I believe, 6th last year, and so would just continue a bit of an upward trajectory in a driver that former touring car ace, and now increasingly making his time and commitment in this GT4 category. Less than 5 minutes ago, though, both the touring car and the GT4 leaders have just crossed the line. Question for them in terms of how many laps can only be answered by where the overall leader of the race is. Not quite sure exactly where Austin Young sits right now.
Just crossed the line.
So he's going to put another lap on these drivers. We've maybe got 3 more laps to go.
Yeah, not long to go in this race at all. So if you're Sven Haase, you need to be thinking, do I have that overall pace with that fresher rubber to be able to overtake and pull away, or am I waiting for that last lap? The problem is, if you choose to wait for that last lap and you make a mistake, you've thrown away that one opportunity. Whereas you go for the move now, you're giving yourself half a chance to then defend that place. But it's going to be tight at the line, I feel.
I agree with you there. That is for sure. The two class leads an overlap right now. Does this help Cody Death? The one thing that we've called out is last place you want to be stuck behind a touring car is into the Le Mans chicane. So either side of the traffic they'll go. Haas is just trying to think about the shortest distance down to the corner, and they'll blow past Valero just in the nick of time, slide back into a single file queue, and now rocket back off to turn number 1. Race leader coming up behind them as well. There is Austin Young, a little bit further back in terms of the line. It should be 2 laps to go, though, this time by.
The problem for Sven that time was his line was compromised going into the chicane by Gao Valero and not getting that move done until they actually got into the chicane. So that would have compromised him a little bit here. But look at him now. He's right up to the rear bumper once again of your race leading Cody Death. And Death is just there going, please, time, just give me the white flag, give me the last lap, please. Let's get this done now.
And former teammates, again, I'll call that one out in the GT4 class. So Sven and Cody have raced together their fair share as well, which, Paul, I think in many ways makes this even more intriguing, right? Because they know kind of the tendencies of one another. They've practiced plenty. They've looked at data for one another. They kind of have a pretty good playbook for how to approach this situation.
Yeah, and it either gives you the edge or it makes you think, actually, I know that he's strong at this point and this point. Yeah, let's see how this pans out. But having that knowledge, intimate knowledge of a teammate or a former teammate, it can egg you on a little bit to stick one over them, as diving between them is the LMP3.
That was Austin Young, the race leader, who went in between the two GT4 battling cars. And so confirmation, we're getting ready to see the white flag. One more lap to go. And Paul, this is where I almost feel for Austin Young, because he's dominated this race. We haven't talked much about him because he's been so dominant. And at the end of the race, we're focused on 2 fantastic drag races to the line. And I can't peel my eyes away from either of the fights on our screen.
Is this a practice run for Sven?
Yes.
You sometimes see this, that it's a practice run the lap before. I just don't think that you're getting as much of a draft in these GT4s as you are in the TCRs. I think that's what you're seeing here. And I think Sven might actually have to make this move into turn 1.
On to the final lap then of the iRacing Roar presented by SimMotion. Touring cars as well. Will they be thinking a similar situation? Sven Haas has got back up underneath. They work their way to the International Horseshoe. Cody Death has been passed. He'll have to go stern on the defense, lunge back up under the brakes, and force his former teammate out wide onto the marbles. Death will hold on. Through the Horseshoe come the touring cars as well, and you can barely put a bumper between the two of them.
Oh, this is fantastic stuff. Brilliant in both races. But Death, what's not helping Sven here is that prototype traffic. That's going to just give Death a bit of a gap here.
It's all about the exit, you'd feel, out of turn 6. Back onto the banking. Cody Death looks in the rearview mirror, and the sight will be quite ominous. The fact that Sven Haas is right there. Problem with the Le Mans chicane, it's high speed, it's high commitment. Haas may be a bit too far behind as they have to go the long way around on some traffic.
The TCRs as well, they're close together as Haas makes it through. Race leaders out of the bus stop chicane, Le Mans chicane for the final time as well.
It's been a remarkable race, another blockbuster to kick off. Another year of iRacing special events. Sven Haase sends it through the braking zone. He sent it a bit too deep. He'll lose all momentum and potentially give Cody Deeth the victory. Lights flashing consolation. But at the front of the field, strolling his way into victory lane, it's Austin Young, HydroRace Geodesic Racing, the winners of the iRacing Roar Before the 24. We'll flip our way over to the touring cars as well. Cody Deeth has held on in the GT4s, but the drag race between Gaio Valero and Konstantin Stolzenberg. It's between Honda Civic and Audi RS3. Gaio Valero will get it done in style. 2/10 the margin at the line, and Paul, what a way to open up the year.
I think Stolzenberg ran out of fuel right at the end. He just suddenly lost power and lost speed, so great work then from Gaio Valero to win that race in TCR, but Stolzenberg seemed to be just a little bit sputtery towards the end.
And well, there's only one way that can really figure that one out. Let's go back and see if we can hear it on the replay. You can see it on the revs as well. That car is not going anywhere forward. A little bit too close on the fuel number, and Konstantin Stolzenberg is deprived of a chance of fighting all the way to the very end. But three very worthy winners, one in dominant fashion, two pushed all the way to the very end, and now they'll look forward to next week's iRacing Daytona 24, the biggest prize of the special event calendar. We'll give a moment for these winners to cycle their way back around. Not sure that Cody Deeth maybe has got enough fuel to do so. Gaio Valero celebrating off in the grass, but Paul, I mean, we've been now together in the broadcast booth for this event for the last couple of years, and I've got to say I look forward to it each and every time January rolls around.
And I think that was one of the more exciting finishes that we've called here as well in the iRacing Roar. Great stuff to see, and making sure to use every single piece of that rubber that he's paid for is Cody Deeth. Thoroughly deserved win for him, and Austin Young. We barely mentioned him throughout the race, apart from when he binned it, but my goodness, what a performance from Austin at the front of the prototype field.
I mean, if we aren't going to mention you much, at least it should be if you finish at the front, right? And a dominant win. The margin could have been even larger at the very end of the day, and a foggy, overcast afternoon in the Sunshine State is not going to dampen the mood of our race winners. Gaio Valero celebrates in the background as well. Looking forward to catching up with both of them in our post-race coverage. Confirmation of the results. Stetson wearing Austin Young strolls his way into victory lane. 25.4 seconds clear. That margin could have been upwards of 40 if he had avoided a couple of mistakes maybe here and there. Pascal Stix for Core Sim Racing, 9 positions gained for him, 10 positions for Dario Frattini. Both of them starting outside the top 10, but staying clear of all the drama and working their way past the likes of Brandon Rosberg, Francis McGinn, and Fernando Busquets. Jan Senkowski, slightly different strategy and setup called for him. 7th, exactly where he started, in front of Felipe Barreto, who finishes in front of Nick Thyssen. Daniel Lomba, the final car to round out the top 10. And then just 2 more cars left on the lead lap. Theo Jensen, Benjamin Cora. Before you get down to 1 lap down, Kevin Doguet and Damien Vrie. Daniel Harris finishes this race 4 laps down. He'll be thinking about what could have been given the pace that he's shown. Ivan Machado Perez as well, a similar situation before Enrico Trenti, Byron Pierce, Alex Ardoin, and then Timo Milikangas and Niels Cox at the very back of the LMP3 class. 3/10, that's all that splits former teammates Cody Deeth and Sven Haase, but it's a battle between 2 Mercedes, and it was the run out of the Le Mans chicane that gave Deeth exactly what he needed. Corentin Gunes a little bit closer to Aaron Lopez and Alberto Seno at the end, wondering if maybe some fuel margins played a factor there. Jamie Fluke able to finish in 6th position, 7 spots up from where he started, in front of Alexander Peregrina. 7 spots gained would be impressive, but 12 spots gained for Timo Hayden, 13 for Lucas Tolman, and then Jack Sedgwick rounds out the top 10. Claudio Mack, John Badeford, DJ Alessandrini, Chris Beats, Florian Bodin, Damon Woods, Kevin Desnoires, Patrick Kingston, Jamie Christensen, and Vladislav Shopov round out the top 20. And then just well, Einjan Guven, Theodor Bergersen finishing the race, Pablo Castro, Dylan Burse, Olivier Piatek, Yuri Kastrup and Christian Steenberg not seeing the end of the race and getting us into the touring cars, where 3/10 between Valero and Stolzenberg, spluttering to the line in the case of the Honda Civic, while Gonzalo Fabi just edges out Miguel Freitas, much closer than I think anyone could have expected. Shizlar Nagy finishes 5th in front of Eric New, with Agustin Fernandez, Norbert Leitner, Matthias Pentela and Carlos Mosca the rest of the top 10 in class, with Eric Goldner and Logan McKenzie getting tangled up in incidents through the course of the race. Well, it's a party down in Victory Lane. Austin Young standing by with Paul Smith.
Well, Austin, hopefully we can get you, but wow, what a win for you. It was more about keeping it on the track really for you, wasn't it, for the majority of the race, but at the start you were given a bit of pressure, weren't you? Hopefully we can hear from Austin. We're currently, I can't hear him anyway.
I can't hear him either, unfortunately, I can confirm.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me.
The joys of...
sorry. I fixed it. Sorry,
there
guys.
We go.
Yeah, no, definitely would have been a fun battle with Ivan and Daniel. They were keeping me honest, pressure me into some mistakes, but once they had their incident, it was easy to kind of just maintain pace, stay focused, keep it clean.
And how tricky is it for you when you've got a bit of a gap there at the front to keep your focus there whilst working through this lap traffic? And yes, we did capture your little spin there at the Western Horseshoe.
Yeah, it's a bit tough because we're all super trimmed out this week on low downforce. So when you're offline, and then you've got the new marble system that when you do get offline can make it pretty tough to manage, especially with the classes and the differences in speed. But also when you have the gap, you don't have to be as aggressive, so you can kind of let the field come back to you.
And well, you know, this is obviously the start of the period of the special events. iRacing Daytona 24 hours in a week's time. Does this set you up in a good way of getting into the rhythm of the track?
Yeah, Daytona's always a track that I get on with. So I to be honest, I haven't done a single prep lap for the 24 yet. I've just been hanging out in the LMP3. So we'll start that now and see what we can do.
Well, Austin, congratulations on the race win here, and all the best for next week as well.
Thank you, guys.
And then we move on to the winner in GT4, Cody Deeth. Cody, I mean, talk us through that one. That was some real pressure that you were feeling all the way through there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite an intense battle for the last lap. Yeah, look, just hit the marks every lap. Had Sven to help me out, and we just broke away, got a bit of a gap, so we could have our own fight at the end, which was pretty good.
And was it always that strategy that you were going to have coming into this one, of just having a little bit of a shorter first stop to then get the jump over those that went on a longer first stop?
Yeah, it was pretty much, if me and Sven were together, we knew we had the pace to be able to push each other away. So yeah, we just made a decision with about 10 laps to go or so, just under fuel, and try and break a gap, which is what we did, and seemed to work out pretty well for us.
I certainly did that. And just next week then, how are you looking for the 24?
Yeah, pretty good. Got a announcement coming soon, but new team is on the way, so that's going to be quite exciting for for next week. Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting.
Well, all the best for that, and best luck for next week. Cody Deeth finishing first in GT4. And then we'll move on to the winner in the TCR class, and by far the best class in my opinion, Gael Valero. Gael, I mean, talk us through that race. That looked to be really close stuff between yourself and Konstantin all the way through.
Yeah, kind of close. Took an hour to really dilute the pack. For that, it's really about fuel saving. And as you can see on the end, it paid to do this extra lap, to do this extra fueling. And yeah, after that was just constantly pushing, because I felt on the car behavior that Constantin still needed to save. I just didn't know how much, and what a relief at the end. I just saw the car not catching anymore and just flying away with it.
And how tricky was it for you to manage your race, to do the fuel saving, and have that quicker lap traffic coming through and compromising you? How tricky was that?
Depends how much you want to give away, basically. First stint, as long as you can keep up with the lead group, you're fine. So it's not too bad to give up some time. Actually, you can use that time when you see there's trouble coming ahead. You just lift and you anticipate that. Second part, I didn't try to deal with it as much as Constantin, because he had to catch up pretty much every time. He was behind me, 0.4, then got sent by an LMP3 or a GT4, so he got back at 0.9, so he had to push again. So I wasn't the one that had to manage that much this situation, but yeah, it obviously played a part in this win.
Well, Kyle, congratulations. TCR victory here in the iRacing Roar.
Finally win in wrong wheel drive.
There we go, Arjuna, our race winners here, and all thoroughly deserved.
And I have even more appreciation for Gael now, just for making sure to slip the shot in. He won the race in wrong wheel drive. Paul, like I said, I look forward to the iRacing Roar. It's the start of the sim racing special events. It feels like the start in many ways of the endurance racing year as well, lining up with the Dubai 24 taking place the same weekend as well. Tomorrow, I'm excited, Michelin 240, final round of the IMSA Esports Global Championship, but we return here to the World Center of Racing in a week's time. 18th of January, 24 hours of coverage. It's the iRacing Daytona 24, powered by VCO once more. The 5th year VCO partners up with iRacing for a set of Grand Slams, and it is the biggest sim race of the year. Oh, and Paul might have accidentally muted himself. Or we've totally lost him.
I thought you perfectly wrapped that up. I thought it was brilliant. But yeah, no, it's one of my favourite events of the year to commentate on, and I'm looking forward to it next week. It should be an absolute cracker.
It will be an absolute cracker. You'll hear hopefully Paul and myself for a little bit of that broadcast as well, alongside the rest of the fantastic team that we do have here at RaceSpot TV that helps put all of these shows together. But it's about that time that we bid you farewell and get ready to go. Don't forget, tomorrow you can join us on the iRacing Esports Network at 2 p.m. Eastern for the final round of the IMSA Esports Global Championship with Countdown to Green by Traction GG kicking off just before then. In a week's time, we'll get back here to the World Center of Racing for another edition of the biggest sim race of the year. More than 10,000 drivers from around the globe will take to Daytona and challenge themselves for a great spectacle of racing. To kick off the year, though, the Roar always signifies that racing is back. On behalf of our team at RaceSpot, Arjuna Kankipati joined alongside by Paul Smith, and signing off for the 2025 iRacing Roar presented by SimMotion. Congratulations to Austin Young, Cody Deeth, and to Gael Valero, winners here to kick off their new year.